Thank you. I'd like to call the February 28th meeting of the Common Council together to order. The time is 7:34. If you'll please rise and join me in pledging allegiance to our nation's flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Thank you. Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Burnett,
Present.
Mr. Camacho,
I'm here.
Mr. Goldstein,
Here.
Ms. Najolski Eichner,
Present.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Ms. Ayers,
Present.
Mr. Ugelman,
Present.
Ms. Revoluz,
Here.
Ms. Young,
Here.
Mr. Kites,
Here.
Ms. McMurr,
Present.
Ms. Alterman,
Here.
Mr. Meek,
Here.
Mr. Livingston,
Here.
Ms. Shanahan,
Here.
15, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, acceptance of the minutes of the regular meeting of February 14th. I'm sorry, the special meeting of February 14th, 2023. Do I have a motion? Ms. Smith? Any corrections, deletions, or omissions? Mr. Goldstein?
I just would say there should be, at the very last page of the minutes, where it was asked how much of the money from cannabis sales will go toward the school budget. Mayor Rilling said that has not been determined yet. I would just add that the city has not received any money whatsoever from any cannabis sales because there have not been cannabis sales in the city of Norwalk. That's a gap.
Okay. Thank you. Any further comments, questions, omissions, deletions? Seeing none, all in favor of the minutes as corrected? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, approval of the minutes or acceptance of the minutes of the regular meeting of February 14th, 2023. Do I have a motion? Mr. Hoovelman. Any corrections, omissions, deletions? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes as submitted? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Abstain.
Mr. Meek is abstaining. Okay. Next item on the agenda is public participation. We know there's a lot of people here this evening that want to speak on the school budget or the budget for the Board of Education. We want to hear what you have to say. We ask that you try to keep your comments to 3 minutes so that other people or everybody has an opportunity to speak. As you know, the budget process is a work in progress. That what is originally put out sometimes changes rather dramatically by the time the final budget is in place. We'll be working with the Board of Estimate and Taxation. We'll be sitting and meeting with each department in the city of Norwalk to go over line item by line item what their budget reflects and having them justify the requests that they make. At that point in time, the Board of Estimate and Taxation, once they reach a consensus on what the budget should be, then they will have a public hearing at which you're all invited to come back and speak again. And I know that tonight, Mr. Burnett might want to have a comment relative to the budget this evening, or we won't be voting on the cap this evening.
We will not be voting on the operating budget cap this evening. We will be holding that vote at a special meeting of the Common Council on Tuesday, March 7th, beginning at 7:30 p.m. here in the council chambers.
So we won't be voting on the cap tonight, but we will be voting at a special meeting on March 7th. And again, the Board of Estimate and Taxation, once they determine what their recommended budget is going to be, we'll be holding another public hearing. And again, you're all invited to come out and speak to the Board of Estimate and Taxation. So with that said, if we can call the speakers, again, if you can try to keep your comments to 3 minutes, we would be most appreciative. Thank you.
Kristen Penta.
Hi.
My name is Kristen Penta, and I'm at 55 Glenwood Ave. First and foremost, thank you for the tireless and thankless work that you all dedicate your time to. I come from a family of educators, nurses, and police. I get it. I'm not a Norwalk native, but Norwalk is now home for the last 16 years, and where my husband and I raise our family. We have an 8-year-old at Tracy and a rising kindergartner, and I'm coming with here today. I am a mom, a social worker, and most days I feel that my most important role is an employee here at MPS. I want to share a little bit of the story, so please stay with me. 18 years ago, I graduated with my degree. I always wanted to be a school social worker. I spent my life in school. I know, most of us did. But when I was on school break, I was usually at my dad's school. Dad is a retired principal, and I was always amazed at how these kids interacted with him. They loved him. So do I, but they adored him. I soon realized that schools were happy, challenging, and fun places, and it was where I wanted to be when I grew up. I landed on an MSW, and I wouldn't change that for the world. I knew I always wanted to be in a school. The school social worker at my dad's school said, Chris, get the clinical experience first, work in the community, understand systems, get a feel for how it works. So I did. For 6 years, I worked with families linked with DCF, residential placements, educational placements, families who struggled with trauma needs, basic needs, and families who just needed support for a small season. I left that work and headed towards schools. I've worked in Bridgeport, New Haven, and now Norwalk. I share this because 12 years ago, when I left the community mental health system, it was already overloaded. There were already wait lists for clients, and there were cuts in that system. I believe wholeheartedly we cannot do this mental health work without our community mental health partners. But to not finance the BOE with enough money to keep our current mental health team intact worries me. To maybe set a captain thinking of shifting money towards community mental health providers to do the work, I think about this with caution. This is not because I question their ability, I question the capacity. We refer families out, and there's already 2 to 6 week wait lists. Some students don't have 2 days.
Enter the meeting password followed by pound.
Let's not release one system to overload another. Please consider that if you are going to go elsewhere for mental health support, do the due diligence. Be sure all systems can support at 110%. That's what our students need. Whether it's high-level anxiety, disorganized thinking, intrusive thoughts, impulsive behaviors, students are not available to learn without these symptoms alleviated and relationships to support them. The studies support this. I've worked in 3 school districts, and in all 3, the plight is the same each year. Let's make Norwalk a standout. Forget the line, fund the schools. Fund the needs of our kids so they too can choose a future that they love and would fight for. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lisa Brenton.
Sherman Park. Been coming to these things since 2005. Last Fridays, we gave away another city parking lot for apartments. Norwalk's leadership bragged with the governor that we were the fastest growing city in Connecticut. 10 years on, all this development hasn't produced enough revenue to keep up with school funding. A week ago, while chatting to a non-political friend about Norwalk's budget, her response was, move to Mars and you become a Martian, meaning good people who get elected to office often become part of the status quo. Elected to represent the people, many fail to do so. Last week, I said only a few of you wanted to discuss the relationship between housing policies and education. With all due respect to Henry Dashowitz and every finance director before him, Norwalk parents and residents must also accept the responsibility for years of allowing city officials to compartmentalize our planning and zoning, the capital budget and servicing its debt, and the impact that it has on our operating budget. The BOE's request is alarming. Harder to spot was the creative accounting that makes the other departments look responsible. The fact remains that all of our city departments are struggling because we can't generate enough revenue to handle the increased density without substantially increasing property taxes. Norwalk's finances and Hartford's role requires honest discussion in a public place. not in a closed door Sunday morning meeting at the bunkhouse, so that you can get your story straight. Courageous conversations are needed to discuss how Norwalk is going to financially and operationally manage the unintended consequences of growth, including but not limited to the issues that I've been beating over and over and over for years. And that is the illegal apartments, the landlords who cheat the property tax system with overcrowded, unsafe housing, the campaign donor developers receiving tax credits while giving nothing back to our schools, our disproportionate intake of immigrant students, and Harvard's failure to compensate us with ECS for sanctuary funding, and the millions lost in lawsuits that involve the city, land use, or city employees. This budget session will get resolved, perhaps not happily. We'll be back next year, as we are every year, and the cost revenue gap just gets getting wider. One thing we should all discuss with our state reps, that caucus meeting never happened, includes a discussion on alternative funding sources for Norwalk, a revenue source that everybody can contribute to. The city sales tax has been discussed for years. It would draw from our wealthy neighboring towns who shop at stores they won't zone in their own communities, and from those living, working, and attending our schools, but not participating in the traditional economy. You all want to serve our city. You can't just talk about the easy stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Talia Guidman.
My name is Talia Guidman. I was at 113 North Street. Good evening, Mayor and Queens Council, good evening, and North families in attendance and to Zoom. I'm Talia Guidman, and I live at 113 North Street, and I'm here as a lifelong North resident, NPS Mom 3. One in Red Rocks and 2 in Tracy, and I'm also the school nurse at Kendall. I'm here to state my strong belief in support for all of the essential workers and the NPS system. Teachers, counselors, social workers, paraprofessionals, cafeteria and custodial workers. They were all the essential workers you all hired and contracted during COVID. No one could foresee this dilemma, but you all need to find the funding above 4% to meet their needs to continue to come back and serve you and our population, specifically our kids, my kids. I've lived here all my life. I want to continue to live here and have my children flourish. However, when you talk about 4%, we wouldn't have this discussion if we were talking about the fire, the police departments. We're discussing this because you all think we can trim the fat from our children because they don't have the voices to come up here and face you. I might not have an eloquent speech prepared like Kristen Penta. She did a wonderful job, but I'm speaking to you passionately and from the heart. This is unacceptable. This is your job. Your job is to find the fundings from our taxes to make this work and make it work so it doesn't appear to be a sandbox fight over a toy. You have a rainy day fund that is essentially untouchable from my consideration and so many others. If that's where the money has to come from, so be it. Pull it and make it happen and stop making me feel panicked as a parent that my children are going to go into their school next year and not have the very people they deserve to be behind them, supporting them, and helping them thrive. This is your job, not ours. I'm begging you, and we shouldn't have to. I've paid my taxes. You all have copious amounts in little pockets throughout this entire system. Pull it from somewhere else, not from the innocent who can't stand up and fight the way we all feel we need to right now. Please do the right thing.
Nanine Randall.
Thank you, Common Council. Thank you for all the work that you do. I think this is a very difficult situation for all of us. there is a lot on the table, and I appreciate all that you're going through and asking the right questions and really trying to do your due diligence. I'm coming to you, Jane Randolph, 14 Kingsbury Road. I am a mother of a 13-year-old and Nathan Hale. I'm the co-president of the PTA there, and I'm a Board of Education member. As a proud member of this community, I come today to you to urge to approve the school budget proposal. This budget is not just numbers and figures, it's an investment in the future of our children and our community. As a parent, I have seen firsthand the impact that quality education has on our children's lives. It shapes them into well-rounded individuals, prepares them for the challenges of the world, and sets them on a path towards success. But this cannot happen without the proper resources. The proposed budget includes essential funding for new materials, technology upgrades, and professional development for our educators. These are not just luxuries, they are necessities. Our children deserve access to the latest information and tools to succeed in the modern world. Beyond that, the budget also includes resources for mental health services and support staff. The pandemic has taken a toll on all of us, but especially on our children. They need our support now more than ever, and the proposed budget recognizes that. But the impact of this budget goes beyond our children. A strong school system is the foundation of a strong community. It attracts new families and businesses, increases property values, and ensures a bright future for us all. I know that times are tough and that tough decisions have to be made. I urge you to prioritize our children and our community in your decision making. Invest in their future, and they will reward us all with their success. So I ask you to approve the school budget proposed before you. Let's show our children that we believe in their potential and that we are committed to their future. Let's show our community that we understand the importance of education and that we are willing to invest in it. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you.
Jan Degenstein.
Mayor, council members, fellow citizens. I'm Jan Degenstein. I live at 407 Newtown Avenue. When I was a parent of school-age children, I appealed to the decision makers to provide any and all services that would benefit the education of our region. People who opposed those initiatives, so mostly to keep down costs. There are limited financial resources, and there are other issues that senior citizens and others confront. Or they have reasons to oppose the increase in education costs. They're demonstrable. Food insecurity, at-risk domicile, increased healthcare needs, public transportation, safety, rising inflation, and fixed incomes. You have a tough job to try to balance all of that. And they don't envy it. I think there are creative ways that an education, good education, great education can be financed. So I chose to be the champion of our children. In the past 10 years, we've had 2 election cycles that exposed severe divisiveness, mean-spiritedness, and extreme prejudice. After the prolonged human isolation brought forth by COVID, and in an era where mass murders are reported with alarming frequency, the needs of our children have never been greater. There's a time of sadness, loss, fear, and a moment of darkness. Never before, never ever. We as adults cope. Children can barely comprehend what is going on, and they haven't the tools to manage. I implore each of you as surrogates, prioritize the needs of children, our children. Make it number one, make that the number one need. To increase the budget proposed by the Board of Education to accommodate all the programs that are necessary for the benefit of our children. They are all essential. To me, if less is done, it would be a tragedy. stand as a true servant of our children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah Luchansky.
Evening, Sarah McElhenney, I reside at 6 Susan Court. I've been in Norwalk 5 years, and involved in this property about 4. Not gonna lie, I had a hard time getting engaged this year. It's exhausting. It's exhausting as a parent to come here year after year, asking for your kids to get the education you deserve. And, you know, I grew up in a neighboring town. And I go out with friends from high school and I defend living in this city. They look at me like I'm insane for having chosen to move to Norwalk. And I defend our school, and I believe all of it. We have so many options, we have so many wonderful programs in this city. Our kids can go to a dual language magnet school. They can go to Bank Street Method where my kids go. There's so many amazing things about Norwalk. And yet we're sitting here today having same discussions, problems of our own making. Because we flat funded the schools 2 years ago. Because of that, they had to move $6 million of positions into the general fund, or from the general fund into the ESSER funds. And now, guess what? We're gonna lose those positions. And those positions are social workers, they're school counselors, there are other people like the media specialists that are now in the schools. Can I tell you how excited my little girls were to have a library back at CMS? Because we lost our library. So this year, when they got to come back and go to a library and have this, they sang a song with him at their last all school meeting. I mean, these are things that our children are going to lose if you do not fund the schools. And I hear a lot of things about needs and wants, and I'm gonna be honest. So let's say we close the Welcome Center, the Family Center. What's that gonna take? Millions? 2? Let's say we get rid of busing for the middle school, the lotteries, maybe 87,000. So where's the fact? People spend so much time talking about wants versus needs, but no one can actually pinpoint abuse of funds. No one has given a good reason why we can't meet our contractual obligations. Instead, we hear that it's fiscally irresponsible to support the schools. Is it going to be fiscally irresponsible for you to raise my taxes when you come in and increase all of our property values because of the benefits that COVID brought to us, which was an increase in real estate prices? I'm curious, I'm waiting to see, because if you're not willing to help our kids today, I don't want to stay in this city because I'm tired, and I'm tired of coming here year after year. And I know the city struggles, don't get me wrong, I understand the city side is hard too, but they found $12 billion. But yet we're still touting the line, oh, we're flat funding, you know, it's all the same. It's not the same, so please, as a parent, as a taxpayer, as someone who loves the experience my children are having in their school, and I don't want to see them lose it, please just fund our schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara Meyer Mitchell.
Good evening. I know from the faces and from the responses that people walk by it. So I'm not prepared for today without it. But I do want to thank you. I'm getting old, I can't see my face where I used to. I do want to thank you for leading during an incredibly difficult time. And for helping each other to figure out how to solve the problems that were created by a global pandemic and a huge infusion of federal cash that we then spent on salaries that have to be sustained or should be. I do remind you that all of those things were things that the Board of Ed had hoped to do as part of the counseling redesign that we did in 2018, 2019, 2020. So yes, there was federal money to help us do that, but we should have always been doing that and sustaining it. So now we have to figure out how we do that. You can tell from what people are saying about what they experienced in the schools, how that's improving their experience. So you guys know why you were all there for the most part, Nora, you and Nikki, you were there, you know, people come in and come go out, but we have made so much progress in this city, not just in the schools, but at the beach, at Cranberry Park, in City Hall, modernization, on the streets, the sidewalk, the bike path. I see the work you're doing. And I know that you struggle to fund it, and you feel anxious about being able to maintain the money that you need, especially with flood mitigation and environment. I get it. It's not easy. But the problem we have today was created by the board of Estate taxation behavior about in favor of using federal funding. However, you now own the problem and have to find your way through it. I don't envy that path. Very difficult. But we must, because we all saw the need on Thursday night. We all heard. I didn't talk about facts and figures despite having an 8-page piece of paper. Because I couldn't stop crying at that meeting. I didn't know that other families were struggling about this one. And I urge you, if I'm willing to speak about that publicly, I urge you to step up and support all the other families that are sitting for a meeting crying too. I know that the superintendent's budget is astoundingly high increase that she's requesting. I urge you to look at Bridgeport and what their superintendent said. We received more federal funding than other communities. So when that funding goes away, our cliff is more steep. In addition, that's exacerbated because we didn't ramp up from local.
You're at 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Excellent. Thank you for your time and your grace. All of the side is.
We had a speech that you wrote out prepared and I was going to stay over, but as you saw, she's from the heart. So what I would just say is simply the figures that I had prepared with Barbara over the last week or two showed me that we were the only community that zeroed out 2 years ago. Everybody else got something. And so that hole really does need to be filled. And the only way I see that we sort of avoid suffering from that mistake 2 years ago forever is to do a little bit of an extra jump. Like we got 0 when we needed 4, so maybe we need 8 to 4. Like there's got to be a way to like fill that gap what's left so that going forward more can product our kids deserve.
Thank you. Before we move on, if there's anybody else that has not signed up, I believe there's another sign up sheet down here. So if you want to come down and sign up, we probably have about 5 speakers left. But I'm sure there are more people that might want to make comments.
Sarah McIntyre? So, yeah, yeah. So there's Lachensky. Yeah. Okay, all right.
So, good evening. My name is Sarah Lachansky. I live at 2 Drummond Court. I'm a parent of 2 Norwalk Public School students. They both attend Cranberry Elementary. One's in 2nd grade and one's in 4th grade. My experience at Cranberry Elementary has been wonderful. I'm not native to Norwalk. I moved here about 9 years ago, so a lot of this is all new to me. I consider myself an active parent and do my best to connect with my children's teachers. My experience has been that the teachers have a true love for teaching and have shaped my children's lives tremendously over the past few years. The consistent frustration has been that the teachers need more support and more resources. Teachers are working tirelessly and are getting burned out. There's a national teacher shortage. It's a crisis in our country right now. Teachers are leaving the profession. Without the funding requested by the Board of Education, teachers will be spread even thinner. I've spoken to multiple teachers who have raved about the support that they've gotten over the past few years for different trainings. I'm not privy to all the information, just the different trainings that they've had to learn how to better educate your students. And how much it's helped to have the extra mental support in the school itself, with the counselors and the social worker. When is enough enough? Our youngest community members will be the ones affected most by the lack of funding. As I'm sure you all know, there's a mental health crisis in the world. Our children's needs are so important. I support the Board of Education and I support our children. Norwalk prides itself on diversity. Norwalk's diversity is beautiful. With diversity comes needs. Without funding, NPS cannot of our beautiful innocent children. Funding the budget for Norwalk's future, now and later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rustin Medley.
Just a moment. I've just been notified that the speakers who come up, if you could speak a little bit more loudly, the people on Zoom cannot hear you.
I'm not a public speaker. I'm really bad at this. I'm stutterer, which doesn't help the cause, but I just wanted to add one personal anecdote to this. You know, I empathize with the situation that we're in here. I know this, though, often feels like it's on your shoulders 100% in this counseling. I understand it's not. I understand this is a state issue, this is a federal issue. You know, we are a city of the haves and the have-nots, right? We have people can families that can afford to put their kids in private schools. We have families that work for jobs that are thankful their child is even in school at all. I don't know a whole lot about a lot of things. There are a handful of things I know about. One of those things, trauma. I lost a stepsister to a suicide overdose. My other sister was in rehab for 12 years off and on for heroin and fentanyl. You know, I largely raised my sisters growing up because my mom was an addict and an alcoholic. And what allowed me to be who I am today, a business owner, successful business person, and halfway decent father, and contributor to our community is through the help and the resources that I had growing up. And I was very lucky to be in a household that had the resources that were able to help me and help the rest of my family succeed in life. You know, what we did program, which got me out of a bit of despair, whether it be counselors, speech therapy, all of these to a huge extent I had during school hours. And I want to just add that a huge percent of our population, if not a majority of our population, needs those school hours to attend to their needs, whether they're academic or whether they're social, emotional. And I want to just flag that. I want to keep that in mind for all of you, that academics is important. We're living in a time of trauma. And there's people the other day that spoke much better than that than I could. And I just wanted you to just make sure that you kept that in mind. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for this support I had. And I hope that's a good moment.
Thank you.
Martha Palma.
Good evening, Erica DePalma, 110 Perry Avenue, District D, POE.
Take these mics down. Take these mics down. These plenty of mics.
Solution. I know. I saved this. Let me just say, I can't listen on.
Testing.
That's not even working that much.
Maybe you can hear me, but there's no audio being broadcast right now.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Diana, you can hear me?
I can hear you. I can't
Okay.
hear anybody over there.
I can
Some-
hear you. I think Zoom can hear, but
some-
nobody there.
Something wrong in council chambers then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear all of you guys too, but I'm also on Zoom.
Okay. I truly thought it was my phone, like I was about to log out and come back in, so I'm glad you said that.
Well,
I'll
we
let,
don't,
I'll let
we don't-
Tom know so that they know.
we don't
Okay.
represent a quorum, so we'll have to wait for them.
I thought it was
True.
intentional because her daughter is hard of hearing, so I thought she was doing like a deaf awareness.
Oh, okay. Okay. Maybe.
No, I'm saying it's not intentional. I thought it was.
Thought, right. Okay, I get what you're saying, but I thought it was just me on my, but okay.
I would never say it's intentional, but it certainly questions capability.
Mm. Hence,
This
hence,
is going,
click,
this
click.
is going on way too long.
Mm. Okay,
Westport had
yeah.
180 people at their meeting last night. Everybody could see everybody. It went off without a hitch. I don't know why we still keep having issues here.
They know
It's
that,
true
they know what we're doing. I just told them what's going on and,
Mhm.
Tom said there's technical things and they're working on it. So
Gotcha.
they know about us,
Can the people on Zoom hear us though?
likely.
Okay.
More than likely.
Thank you to all the Zoomers that said yes. Since it's still not working, I meant for my comment to be heard by the public. I thought she was doing a demonstration on being a student with disabilities. I've seen people do that before and they show how everybody reacts strangely to you and how hard it is to learn like that.
Mm. I can understand.
No, it's not a stunt. We just can't hear.
Yeah. They asked if we could hear them now and I said no. And now we're not hearing the,
And this woman speaking, right? I'm sorry, Lisa, not to cut you off. I'm so
no,
sorry.
no.
That's Erica.
Yeah.
Erica, oh,
Letting
sorry,
them know.
Erica, sorry.
No,
Yeah.
no, that's Erica speaking on the podium. It looks like she's actively speaking. I'm not a
Yeah.
good lip reader.
No, she's actively
I-
speaking and we can't hear them. So I let Tom know that.
And you know what's crazy? You talk about lip reader. My record live is right over her lip on my phone. I can't even see her lips. And the mic, I wouldn't even be able to see her lips.
Lost, and we continue to combat heightened learning loss and mental health struggles
Oh, there we
in
go.
children impacted by the pandemic. It's important to put emphasis on the fact that we're combating both learning loss and mental health struggles stemming from the pandemic. There's no denying the public health impact this disease had, but as you know, it's caused economic stressors and isolation. A mental health epidemic has quickly spread throughout this nation. And as a result, we have children with significant anxiety struggles and others that have felt overstimulated and socially anxious post-lockdown. Having served on several boards for both profit and nonprofit organizations, I was prepared for this role. What I wasn't emotionally prepared for was the number of crisis calls that I am privy to on a weekly basis. As a nation and as a community, we have to close the gap. It's now a learning gap and a social skills gap. And we cannot do so until our children feel safe, fed, and supported by adults, and that those adults ensure them access to their education through the specialized staff and health professionals with expertise to support their complex learning profiles. I'd like to close by commenting that while I appreciate the suggestions that mental health should be addressed by families or consolidated under city services, that as a nation, we've learned from COVID that the importance of having a lead agency with accountability for student outcomes. The consequences of fragmenting these services were exposed in COVID. And as a nation and as a community, we need to fail forward. We need to holistically support and fund our students' needs so that they can access their education. Thank you.
Thank you. I've been told that people,
It's working now.
okay, it's working, never mind.
Lisa Shanahan, can you speak?
Yes, can you hear me speaking okay?
We can't hear.
We can't hear her.
I'll try that again.
I
Still
can hear
nothing.
you, Lisa.
I know you can hear me, but in council chambers, we're testing.
Yeah, I know. I was just trying to show it's on our end. We can hear you, but on their end.
Ms.
I'll let
Shanahan,
them
could you try to speak again, please?
Can you hear me now?
I'm talking the whole time.
Well, she can hear us at least. She's responding.
Yeah, she can hear us, but we can't hear her.
Exactly.
Speaking. Lisa, keep talking.
Ms.
Okay.
Shanahan, could you try to speak again, please?
Yes, can you hear me yet? I'll just.
Oh, yeah, we can hear you.
Now you, okay, great.
Not loud enough.
Now I'm going to stop talking.
Who's next?
Azra Asada.
Jordan, do we have another list up there?
Hi guys, my name is Azra Asad and I am at 7 Blue Mountain Road. I've got 3 kids in the schools and 1 alum who is my husband. And we really love the schools. We see how hard everybody works. We've been in Tracy and West Rocks and Norwalk High. Really impressed with how difficult and hard it is for all of the staff at our schools to meet the needs of the kids because they really want to. You can see that everybody has a deep desire to meet their needs. So they make do with whatever they're allotted. And I see staff members doubled up doing things, losing their free time to fill those needs. And I mean, everybody knows I don't envy any of you. I really respect the amount of time and effort that you guys put into this ugly process every year. But the efficiency study that you guys funded found that the school system is working efficiently. There is not a lot of fat there, and nobody knows here what it's like to be a kid in school these days. None of us, meaning none of us understand what that's like. So the fact that more supports are needed now than before shouldn't be a surprise. I'd like you to ask yourself, I just think about why you do this job, who matters. Let's not shortchange the children. We're all going to pay for it later. Because when have short-term solutions been of any long-term gain for any community? So if you guys could find the funds now, be creative, use all of your brain cells. I don't think it's as simple as raising property taxes. I feel like that's a false choice. I feel like there's a lot of strange and nebulous things that happen in city funding. And I also feel like other parts of city government just don't seem to get nickel and dimed as much as the schools do. And I guess that's all I wanted to say. Please fund the schools, because not funding the schools is just not, it's just not wise for anybody in our city.
Thank you. There are 2 people signed up on this list, and then there's nobody else in the audience that has signed up. So if there's anybody else that would like to speak, if you can come up and sign whatever list might be up there. So we have 2 more people right here, and then we'll probably go to the people that are Zooming in.
Mary Ellen Ludwig.
Yeah.
Larry D.
Here she comes.
Ludwig.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Mayor Rilling, Chairman Bennett, Common Council members. I am Mary Ellen Flaherty Ludwig, a Norwalk resident living on Soundview Avenue, and a current member of the Board of Education. When I was old enough to walk to school, I walked from Fairfield Avenue to the South Norwalk train station and over to Chestnut Street at my St. Joseph's. My heritage is Irish Catholic. My grandfather, Patrick, came from Ireland. 90% of my elementary classmates were Italian. All my friends' grandmas spoke little or no English. I cherish my South Norwalk memories, childhood memories, and I want to give back. Since then, I've spent decades as a teacher. Though retired now, my heart is still with the next generation. I'm here to speak about the school budget. Norwalk Public School was flush with money from the federal funds via ESSER grants during the pandemic. Dr. Estrella and her administrators received this directive, and I quote, "Think boldly and create transformative programs for the students." Their response was multifaceted and, in my opinion, based on teaching best practices. One example, teachers were trained in the data collecting skill-targeted support lessons. Looking at K through 3, our most critical group where learning to read sets them up after 3rd grade to read to learn. This group improved by 16%. A remarkable occurrence. The DIVLS 8 standardized test improvement reduced the number of summer school students for us in Norwalk. Clearly, we're on the right track. The cost of doing what we know we can do requires support teachers. I urge you to approve the maximum increase you can in your conscience. Our next generation deserves our every effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
April Winterstorm.
Good evening. Thank you for taking my comments. I really wasn't prepared to do anything other than read my submitted remarks from this afternoon, which some council members responded to. So I do appreciate that you took the time to respond to my letter, excuse me, and that means a lot as a community member and citizen. So I appreciate that. Because I wasn't really setting aside what I really wanted to speak about. Quite frankly, I was really spurred by the courage of so many of tonight's speakers and was reminded of my own childhood growing up overseas as a child of a service member. I moved frequently. If you don't know anything about Army brats, you must know that they move frequently. I understand the mayor's wife is also a military brat. You have this in common. Justin's heartfelt reveal of his childhood and the loss of his sisters who struggled was perhaps not equal in comparison, but this pandemic and mental health crisis has created a special need for our kids, and our schools and our support systems are needed. The budget has taken this into account, and there is no telling what needs may be in their future. As someone who moved around, who could reinvent myself quite frequently, become the person I really wanted to become rather than the person that I was stuck being within the situation of my school or my upbringing, these kids don't have that. This is our community. This is their community. And I strongly feel that the budget that's outlined and portions of the budget that should be considered to be funded really should take that into account. What these children, what our children need in this community is this support system. And as Justin shared growing up, it was his teachers, it was his after-school activities, it was his music, it was his song who made him the man that he is today. And I think that I just want to thank you for that, Justin. I have so much respect for you. And so I just want to say, I implore you to help. And I do believe that this funding is necessary and hope that you'll continue to think about the children and not just about the education, but the support. This mental health crisis of this pandemic, no one could see. And if you could look at a child who may be 8 or 10 now, who don't get the support that they need and the kind of adult that they can become and thrive under your care and under your approval of the budget, I just want you to take that into heart, because I'm going to think about this every day until this budget is passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan Petronelli. Susan?
Hello, good evening. Thank you for your time. I am Susan Patronelli of 3 Rampart Road. Last week, I had the privilege of attending the Finance Committee meeting, listening to the statistics, supporting the financial needs of our students brought to us by all the parents speaking, the stories of other concerned parents and their children, and also having the opportunity to make my plea in favor of the proposed Board of Ed budget. And I stand here once again as a taxpayer of Norwalk, a registered voter, a mom of 2 beautiful sons, a kindergartner at Brookside, go Barracudas, and one coming up in a couple years, and asking you to approve the proposed budget increase for the Board of Ed. Serving our children should be the #1 priority of this city. Friends and family often try to convince me to move to the surrounding towns in Fairfield County, those that have good schools. They ask if I'm concerned for my children's education. Yes, I am. My husband and I have talked about it a lot, many times. We had the conversation, but we love Norwalk. We love the culture and we love the diversity. And this is the community that I want my boys to grow up in. And so we decided to give Brookside a try. We love Brookside. The teachers and the staff are warm and welcoming. They love these kids. My son has flourished and he loves coming home every day to tell us what he has learned. I love the community of families. I'm the co-president of the PTO and have worked behind the scenes with the staff and have seen firsthand the passion that they bring every single day and that goes into their work. I can see that the Norwalk Public School System is turning a corner for the better. We can't go back. We have to keep the momentum going. We can't cut these budgets. Our children need the continued support. They need the smaller classrooms where they can have attention. They need the paras and the media specialists and the music and the arts and the sports, and they need counselors and social workers. Because everyone keeps talking about the mental health crisis in this country. We can't forget about that. And it's not just COVID. All right, kids can't go to school without being, afraid of getting shot and killed in school. So let's not pretend that that's not part of it too. Then our teachers need the support. All right, they do the job because they love to teach and they love children. We know they're not getting paid enough for it. All right, I just spent a snow day with my kids and I will tell you, please give the teachers all the money. They're underpaid and now we want to overload them. Like our country, our city deserves it as well. A properly funded education system grows the community. And for the minority who disagrees, who think that children can get support outside of the classroom, what privilege you have to assume that everyone has access to help outside the classroom. This is my first experience with town meetings and town budgets and listening to everyone's testimonials. I'm kind of terrified that this is my future. Coming to meetings like this and begging for money for my children, begging for my tax dollars to support my children. And if this town and the elected officials that I elected and support can't support my family and my children and get their job done, then I can't stay. So I'm asking you, please get the job done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cameron. Jeffrey.
So my name is Godfrey Cameron, 28 Woodlawn. And I'll start by saying this, I'm a pretty private person. While I'm comfortable speaking in any setting, I hate telling anybody about myself. Just having to tell you my address in some major forum is odd enough as it is. So first I want to say thank you for the work that you do. It is really difficult. There's a lot of armchair quarterbacks around the world. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to be one of them. Forgive me in advance. So I have a couple kids at home, and I'm an immigrant, came from a place where you beat kids when they don't do things the right way. If you're old school, that made sense to you. They didn't listen, you hit them, right? Give them a whack, we'll figure it out, throw some dirt in it. It is interesting how much I've evolved in my thinking since being here. Understanding exactly what it takes to raise a kid. There's nothing like being a parent to tell you just how good your parents were. Trust me on that. Some of you may not have kids in the current Norwalk public school systems, which means that you may not be as involved from a day-to-day perspective. So I'm going to give you a miniature version of my story. Got two kids. One of them, the youngest, is a hellion. She's a smart one, which makes it worse. Smart hellion. He had a really rough time going to the school. Goes to Brookside Elementary. And it was so bad that, we decided like, hey, you'll only be there for a couple days, or you'll only be there half day, or anything like that. I am privileged. I make a lot of money. I have a good job. And so I'm able to, at a moment's notice, stop what I'm doing in a meeting, tell the people on the call, hey, sorry, got a thing I gotta do, step off, go off, and not lose my job, still get paid, get a bonus at the end of the year. That is my privilege. Someone just said earlier that we would ask third parties, people outside of Norwalk public school system, to provide some of the services that we hope to cut during this budget. She said it just right. What privilege we have. Not everybody got that privilege. It's just not the same way. So back to my hellion. I go pick up my kid, slightly embarrassed, but I know what these teachers go through. They don't get paid enough for the crap we put them through. They don't get paid enough for the crap our kids put them through, but they still come in and day out, every single time with a smile. And I say, you know what, folks, let me pull them out for a little bit, give them a little bit of break, give you guys a bit of a breather. Principal, social worker, psychiatrist, and teacher looked at me as if I was an idiot. The response was resounding and it was non-negotiable. Kids deserve to be in school. We will see him tomorrow. It wasn't a question they were asking me as my son's parent. They were telling me, this is my job, we can do it. My son is young enough at that time where he wasn't reading.
Excuse me, you're at 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Sure, I'll make it quick. The other day I sat brushing my son's teeth, not an emotional guy. I'm wearing this t-shirt right now that says Derek Jeter, and he's mumbling. He's looking at, he's frowning, I'm brushing his teeth, and then he finally says, Derek Jeter. Like I said, I'm not an emotional guy. I'm telling you right now, these services are necessary. You always pay for it in the end. Pay now or pay later, you'll pay for it. So I suggest we pay now. Thank you.
Thank you. No other person has signed up, but what we'll probably do now is go to the people that might be zooming in. And after those people, if anybody changes their mind and like to come down and address the council, we'll be more than happy to accommodate you.
Anybody on Zoom who wishes to address the council, please raise your hand now and we'll let you speak. Sherry McCready Pritchett.
Hello, good evening, Mayor Rilling, Common Council members, and community members. My name is Sherry McCready Pritchett, and I reside here in Norwalk on Dr. Martin Luther King Drive, and I'm also an at-large Board of Education member. First, let me say that the Board of Education is appreciative of the funding that the city provides to the school district. And we are excited about the provision of capital dollars to fund the construction of the new Norwalk High School, Cranberry Elementary, and the South Norwalk School. As a former Board of Estimate and Taxation member, I can appreciate the challenges and financial complexities facing the city. I served on the Board of Estimate when the Board of Education was flat funded at 0%. In retrospect, maybe we should have done something differently. At the same time, we are in critical financial times with challenging needs before us, including increased specialized learning costs, contractual obligations, and of course, the expiration of the ESSER dollars. I have a proposal. Perhaps the city can draw down the fund balance by more than $6 million. Historically, a drawdown of this size has not resulted in an actual drawdown at year end. A spending increase to any department does not necessarily have to come from higher taxes. An increased fund balance drawdown could offset property tax increases. In conclusion, it is my expectation that there will be continued discussions that are informative, thoughtful, and useful to ensure that our students will get the resources and tools that they need to be successful academically and civically engaged. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Ileana Zuniga.
Good evening. My name is Ileana Zuniga. I live in Running Brook Lane in Norwalk. My oldest son is a junior in P-TECH. He was recently one of the 2 finalists for an internship in Washington, D.C. with Senator Chris Murphy. My son is an immigrant and son of immigrants. Spanish was his first language when we moved to Norwalk. He is a proud product of the dual language program in Silvermine, West Rocks, and now P-TECH. He is starting his college journey, and we are excited on what the future holds for him. As a proud Mexican immigrant myself, I am also the founder of Latinos Unidos Norwalk, a group that represents almost 5,000 Latinos in our town, where I hear and learn about the different needs that our community has. Education is the top reason why our families choose our town to come and settle and become a part of our thriving community. My husband and I chose to move to Norwalk from Brooklyn 10 years ago because of the diversity. I gladly pay my taxes so that Norwalk continues to be known as the town that has diversity among other towns that don't. I want all students of Norwalk to have the opportunities that they deserve and have the ability to pursue a higher education. I want us to be the town people move to for the schools, not the town that they run away from. I beg of you, invest in our children. We can have great bike rides and parks and recreation, but without our children and an education, we are not investing in our future. And right now you have a hard decision to make, and it's in your hands. So I beg of you to make the right decision. Thank you for all you do, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Diane Loricella.
Good evening, all. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but I was very moved and very interested in all. I wanted to thank the council, the mayor, and the staff, but also especially the parents and teachers, people that showed up to speak and speak from the heart. I wanted to reiterate some things I said at the Finance and Claims Committee. I think that we need to add more funding to the Board of Education budget. However, the method I wanted to suggest is different than anything you've heard. And I wanted to suggest we reduce more from the spending side of the Board of Ed budget. And then on a citywide, including Board of Ed, we add to the revenue side. So I'll start with the spending side. For many years, as many of you know, I have asked that we enhance and optimize our use of renewable energy. It hasn't been met with a lot of welcoming. In fact, I have an outstanding email where I reached out to the Board of Ed and the NPS staff that we sit down and try to see where we can find in the near future added ways of reducing the electricity budget. The electricity costs for the parents is an operating budget item, as is gas, oil, etc. It is an operating budget item. So one way we could gather more money that we could put back into funding, needed funding like therapists and the like, is to reduce the spending side. But unless and until this, the sincerity shown or lack of sincerity by the NPS staff, some of the board, and the city council members from especially land use and building management, the lack of sincerity is what the problem is as far as reducing electricity costs in our city. We have numerous Board of Education properties that could have had and should have had ground-mounted solar, carport solar, and more rooftop solar than what we currently have, which is very little because of wrong-headed policies about not using current buildings. And other towns like Newtown, Fairfield, and Danbury have found a way to reduce by hundreds of thousands of dollars a year the electric cost. I also wanted to suggest that we end the lease on the Family Welcome Center as soon as possible and move that, which is a good idea, to a current public building like Franklin Center, City Hall. Find a public space that we already own for this welcome center and revise how hard it is for people to sign up at each school when they have new children. On the revenue side, I again plead for this city council to have a full-time grant person and grant team, not a part-time grant person. A city of the size is losing grants. We are losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, even though we have gained many millions of dollars, and that's terrific. But we could get even more if we'd only put our mind to it. So tonight, I just wanted to say thank you for all. You have a tough decision to make. Unless and until the Board of Ed and the NPS staff are willing to really dig down and reduce their spending side, I think that you should not raise the cap. I do believe, though, they need more money. Let's find it on the spending side and give them more money by increasing the revenue side. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Diana Carpio.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mayor Rilling and Common Council members. My name is Diana Carpio, 8 4th Street. I am born and raised in Norwalk. This evening, there has been a lot of data and information given tonight. I will not repeat those, but instead, I ask that the Common Council think long and hard about the budget and the 4% that has been put forth. This budget provides necessary resources for the operations of all schools in the district. The budget also allocates funds for special programs and projects that benefit all students in the district. We really shouldn't be looking at the budget as numbers. We should be looking at the budget as our future leaders and residents. The budget represents the welfare and future of our children. The pandemic was not a joke. For our children who lost so much, they lost friendships. Some lost the will to live. Some lost the ability to speak. Some lost even family members. These are only some of the examples, but my point is, our children didn't just lose in education, they also lost their individuality. 4% is not enough to help them find their individuality or to educate them. For their future is at stake here. We all have to come together and make really tough decisions. And I ask for the children to please think long and hard on that 4%. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah Lemieux.
Oop, hello, can everybody hear me? Yes, nodding. Okay, good. Hi, I'm Sarah Lemieux, Norwalker, former Board of Ed member. And I recently wrote a letter to the mayor and the council and I'm not going to restate it. And I'm also not going to repeat all of the things that so many people have said so eloquently this evening, but I would like to summarize 2 through lines that I noticed. One of which is that a lot of these stories are very moving. A lot of people are having very moving struggles that I think we can all relate to and share. I was very moved by a lot of the speakers, and looking at your faces, I saw that a lot of you seem to be very moved too. So that was one through line. But the other through line that I noticed was that Norwalk Public Schools is meeting these needs very effectively, and not only the social emotional needs that people are having from dealing with this trauma in this time, but they're very effectively meeting the needs of children for literacy and math. They've shown improvements in a time when not a lot of districts are showing improvements. These, the literacy specialists, the math interventionists, they're functioning effectively. So the 2 through threads that I noticed in almost everyone who spoke tonight were that everyone's really going through a lot. We're all going through it together. And the schools are helping, and they're helping effectively in a really holistic sort of way, but also in very specific ways that are measurable. And you guys can see that data if you want to. So that's really all that I wanted to say. And I would really, really love it, and I'm going to continue to advocate for this until you get bored of me advocating for it, if there would be a way to have a standing committee of Board of Ed members and Common Council members that would meet, once a month, once every 2 months, to just have some of these discussions year round, so that everybody doesn't have to play catch up, so that the community doesn't feel so surprised, so that none of you feel surprised, so that working relationships can be more collaborative. So that's my other suggestion. Thank you so much for your time and your service. And it's nice to see all of your faces.
Thank you. I guess once somebody's spoken, you have to remove them as a panelist.
Yep. So that's what we're making sure they're not listed as
Okay.
panelists, but I'm not seeing anybody else listed with their hand raised right now.
Right, you want to ask if there is anybody that wishes?
Yeah. Anybody else who wishes to speak, please raise your hand now. I'm seeing none, Mayor.
So after we had the Zoom, if anybody,
I think one.
one more, okay.
There's 2.
Michael McCarthy.
Hello. Okay, hi. This is Michael McCarthy again. I'm on Richards Avenue, but I'm going to make it really quick because the last time I spoke on the council, that was my first time I've spoken publicly since I was working as a sub back in 2016. So I was very nervous. But to sum it up really quick for you guys is just to see, has the grand list been released yet? Have we been notified of what the grand list is going to be before you make a decision?
Yes, just a quick answer to your question. Yes.
Oh, great.
It hasn't been, the final number is not in yet. We'll be discussing that tonight.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm seeing one more Pam. Could you just state your name on the record? It's not showing up. It just says Pam.
Sure. Hi there. My name is Pamela Young, a Norwalk resident and taxpayer with 3 children in all 3 Norwalk school levels, from elementary, middle school, and high school. I work full time, and so I play catch up and try to get all the details and try to understand what could possibly have it where from a 12% request to where 4% is being presented, and with the need of so much being cut and taken away from the children. If my tidbits of swiftly reading through newspapers daily, all I read about on a weekly basis is school shootings at universities, fear of children. I'm getting notified. I was notified 3 separate times this year to date about warnings of a school shutdown, a fear of a potential shooter at one of the schools. Okay, this is how we live today. Like, consider how it is for the children. Okay, it's so important. All of these social functions, music, arts, any additional social type opportunities for children through the schools is so critically important to their growth and how they become into a a proper adult and part of the community. There is so much lacking today. I feel I wish that I could give more to my kids. Like I'm working so much. And so I would actually implore you to take a look out to the folks that are sitting there in person, and thank you to every single person who was able to show today and speak so eloquently for us that couldn't be there because of getting back from work and my schedules. I would say I'm a co-captain in my one of the classes, and I would say for every person that you see out there, there are at least 20 other parents that wish they could have been there in person to speak for their children and to do what they can to get this budget increased. I mean, I just don't see an option. This is our future. You guys are in a position of making these decisions, and the children are our future. It's in songs, it's everywhere. I mean, you see it happening. I just really truly hope that you will consider all these very well-spoken people tonight. They like had me tearing, and I just can't express enough. I also have people who ask me, like, why don't you, move to, the thought of moving to better school districts that are surrounding us in Norwalk. And you know what, my children, I love that they love to go back to school. They can't wait until vacation is over because they can't wait to go back to school. They didn't care about wearing a mask every single day as long as they could be in school, see their teachers, see their friends. We have lovely teachers. We have a shortage of teachers. As it is, there's been so much turnover, a lot of newer staff, frustrated, experienced, amazing teachers that we should be supporting and giving them what they need.
You're at 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
I'm at my limit. I thank you all for your consideration and really hope that you will do your best to get this budget where it needs to be for the children in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jessica, could you just please state your name for the record?
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Jessica Jones, Newtown Avenue, Norwalk, Connecticut. Yeah, that's obvious. I have 2 children, elementary and middle school level. Both receive services through their IEP. One of those being anxiety due to the pandemic. So I can tell you that as resilient as these children are, if you ask any middle school, any elementary, I can't speak to high school, but I assume it's happening there too. These kids, we all collectively as a human race have experienced a trauma from COVID. A trauma is not necessarily the death of something, but what happened to us never happened before. And these kids don't have the skills to cope. You can see it at 3rd grade level at West Rocks Middle School. I'm hearing that the inmates are running the asylum there. The kids are not okay. They may look it, but they're not. And their teachers, their paras, the psychiatrists, the counselors, these are all the people that are seeing our children for more hours a day than we do. Now, we need them to recognize, we need them to have the support, the finances and everything behind it, because an 18-year-old going out into the world is no good if they can do every math fact, but they can't regulate their emotions. They're going to end up arrested or in jail because they don't know how to control themselves. Losing those supports is failing the children of Norwalk. So we need to give them all that they ask for right now, because like everyone says, the children are the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then Maria, could you state your name for the record as well?
Yes, could you hear me?
Yeah.
My name is Maria Robinson, and I live on Pink Cloud Court in Norwalk. Me and my husband were both born and raised in Norwalk, both graduating from Brian McMahon High School. We then got married and decided to stay in Norwalk. Although we had other choices to go other places, we both decided to stay in Norwalk. We have 2 children, which are graduates from the Norwalk Public School System. I work at Wolf Pit Elementary School as a general ed para. We are also taxpayers of this town, and I would like to thank all of you for allowing me to speak this evening. I am here to ask you to find the funding for the children of Norwalk Public Schools. They are the future of Norwalk. They are the foundation of our city. They deserve to have an education which includes teachers, paraeducators, guidance counselors, specialists, aides, interventionists, and everything else they need. The children are also lucky enough to have programs that include theater, band, orchestra, choirs, dance, sports. Some of the kids actually stay in school because of the programs that we currently have. I feel if any of these programs are in jeopardy, we will see a higher dropout rate. If you want our town to succeed and have people look up to this town, then you need to start at the beginning, which is with the children of this town, who then become the adults of this town. I am not a financier, but you all are here to figure it out, and you have a job to do, and that is to properly fund the schools, because of the future of this town depends on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else who still wishes to speak, please just raise your hand. I'm seeing none.
Is there anybody else in the audience that has not had a chance to address the council that would now like to? You take that as a yes? If you could please also state your name so we can write it down.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Bridget Kennedy. That's my husband. We live on Woodlawn Avenue. Proud member of the Brookside community. I'm our parent co-chair of our SGC. And I'm not super prepared and definitely not a great public speaker. So apologies in advance.
I'm sure you'll do well.
Thanks. I obviously you've heard a lot from a lot of folks here. And a lot of common themes that ring true for our family as well. You know, I wrote some notes ahead of time, and I heard so much of the same, which is really interesting to me because it says that we're all having this sort of shared experience. A lot of us are in the position where we've said, you know, our friends are encouraging us to move to other towns. My husband and I lived in California for a while. We came back to Connecticut because we wanted to be close to family. We chose Norwalk versus some other places in this area where we had more friends, more family, things like that, because we were really attracted to the community. And when we saw that the school performance was on the rise, that things were improving, we were really encouraged by that. And we thought, great, we're going to put our stake in the ground here. We've been here 8+ years. And again, super proud to be part of this community. We've had nothing but a great experience at Brookside. I want to talk just a little bit about my work life, actually, because I deal with budgets all the time. And while I understand that I probably don't know enough about how you manage the budget, when we have to deal with a finite set of funds, we have to prioritize, as I'm sure you all are going through right now. When we prioritize, inevitably, things have to be below the line. We have to make calls about what is a higher priority than something else. We call it stack ranking, right? What is at the top of the stack and what is at the bottom? When I see that we are proposing that essentially to not fund this 8% that we need, the delta between what's being proposed, the 4%, and what's being requested, that says to me that those funds, the things that those will fund, is on the bottom of your priority list. The other things that are being funded are on the top. If that's not the case, if you feel yourself saying, that's not me, that's not how I feel, I don't feel like our children and their educations are at the bottom of the priority list, then I would urge you to take a look at what you prioritized above it. What is more important than that to you? And if there are items there, then why? I think we are challenged to see all of this data as community members, as someone else mentioned, as working parents. Hard to dig into all of the data and all of the details. But that's a question I've been raising over and over and over again as I've been trying to sort of dig through all of this on my own. What is more important when you're dealing with this finite set of resources? Something has to be more important. Otherwise, we should be funding. Thank you.
Properly funded schools because of the future. Future.
Okay, again, if there's anybody else, if not, we will close public participation. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight and sharing your thoughts. And as I said, the Board of Estimate and Taxation will be having another public hearing after they meet with all the department heads. And you're all welcome to come out and address that group as well. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is resignations and appointments. We have no resignations, no appointments, but we have 3 reappointments. We can probably do them all together. We have Dr. Janet Karpiak and Mr. Ken Laline and Terry Tavella-Quell for reappointment to the Board of Health. Do I have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the 3 names for the Board of Health. I had the great opportunity to serve with these 3 individuals on the Board of Health during my tenure there. And each of them are outstanding healthcare professionals. Combined, their experience is over 114 years of healthcare experience. And Janet, Ken, and Terry were all key contributors to the certification of our health department and the recertification since then. And they have been trusted advisors and counsel and provided guidance through the pandemic crisis. So we are fortunate to have their talent and expertise on the Board of Health, and I truly support their reappointment.
Thank you. Any further comment? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. I know Mr. Laline is here. Thank you for your willingness to serve. We appreciate all that you do. Next on the agenda, just my remarks. I just have a couple very quickly. First of all, as I said, I wanted to thank everybody who came tonight to share their thoughts. Those who were able to make it here, those who were not able to make it in person, but joined us on Zoom and shared their thoughts so we can kind of get a gauge as to where the direction will be going. Next, also, I want to thank our Department of Public Works. We were able to clear the streets rather quickly today, and they did, I think, a remarkable job, and I want to shout out to them as well. Last week, we kicked off our first quarterly business roundtable here in the city of Norwalk with a breakfast. It was a meeting that we're going to be doing was every quarter. So that's why it was our first quarterly. That we're going to be having a meeting with people who are in the business community, people who may want to start businesses, people who have businesses already that may want to grow them, or people that have businesses that may need resources that they might not know are available. We're going to be doing that in our community room. We also have opened our Business Development Center at 3 Belden Avenue. And it's a lot of different resources. For those of people who have businesses, there's a lot of resources available, and our team is ready to work with you. There's grants that are available. There's loans that are available. Before we have any more meetings, if you have any questions, if you could please reach out to Sabrina Gadesky or Jessica Ivanishek, who is our Chief of Community and Economic Development, and they'll be more than willing to work with anybody and help them. We also, if you have not seen it already, we're really doing some upgrades at Cap Pasture Beach, which is part of the capital plan that we have in place. Redoing the parking lot. It's going to be looking more like a nautical theme. It's also going to be made safer for pedestrian traffic, because the way the parking lot has been redesigned, there'll be a whole area where the pedestrians can walk safely. Right now, if you go along the sidewalk going out, that's no longer going to be an exit. We're having an exit someplace else so that the pedestrians can have a safe passage getting around the beach. Next, okay, and last, this is the last day of Black History Month. I'd like to thank the members of the Common Council, city staff, and members of the community for participating in the events that city held this month. Unfortunately, tonight they were supposed to have something, but we had to cancel because schools were closed. But it was all planned. It was planned to be held tonight. This month and throughout the year, we'll continue to reaffirm the extraordinary contributions that Black Americans have made to our city, our state, and our union. And we should be celebrating that, as I say, not only during February, but we should be celebrating all the time about our diversity, celebrating what makes us the same, honoring and celebrating how we're different. And that's where we're going to start having respect and tolerance for everybody else. So now I will turn it over to Mr. Burnett, Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And we're going to move directly to our consent calendar. And Council Member Josh Goldstein will be reading the consent calendar for tonight's council meeting.
All right. 7A1, this is under Public Works. Authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all documents necessary to convey an 183 square foot utility easement in favor of the second taxing district, as and where shown on a certain survey entitled Easement Map depicting easement to be granted to South Norwalk Electric and Water across the property of Norwalk Police Department, number 2, Monroe Street, Norwalk, Connecticut, prepared by Redness and Meat, dated December 12th, 2022. 2. Authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into any and all agreements and other documents necessary to accept a sanitary sewer easement deed over 9 Shore Haven Road, Norwalk, Connecticut, confirming easement rights as set forth in certain compilation plan 9 Shore Haven Road, Norwalk, Connecticut, depicting sanitary sewer easement to be granted to the city of Norwalk across the property line of Keechun Lee, trustee Linda Ho Lee, trustee scale 1 inch equals 20 feet, dated January 18th, 2023, and prepared by William W. Seymour and Associates, PC. 7C, Finance and Claims Committee. Resolution. This is 1, resolution requesting a special capital appropriation in the amount of $489,225 to increase the appropriation to fund for the fire department to purchase 2 fire engines, parentheses, pumper trucks, account number noted, parentheses, apparatus replacement, the $489,225 of bonds or notes of the city shall be issued in accordance with the provisions and terms set forth in the original bond resolutions, and authorize the issuance of bonds or notes of the city for project number as noted, parentheses, apparatus replacement. 2, resolution deauthorizing the amount of $489,000 and $489,225 of authorized but unissued bonds from the Police Communications Console account number noted, to purchase 2 fire engines, parentheses, pumper trucks. And that is a short.
Not a very easy.
Consent calendar.
Let's get the short ones.
Thank you, Councilmember Goldstein. You've heard the reading of the consent calendar. I'll call for the question. All those in favor show by raising your hand or virtually raising your hand.
Aye.
All those opposed have the same right. Any abstentions? The consent calendar is approved.
Heidi,
We have, I'm sorry, what was that?
I voted no.
Heidi voted no.
It was my understanding that the consent calendar wasn't going to happen anymore because of another council person's request. So it's my bad for not reaching out and asking for things off consent, but I'm only 1 no. It's okay.
I'm sorry.
At a
Okay.
previous
Are you
public
moving-
meeting, Councilperson Brian Meek had said he was going to request that things were off of consent
Council-
calendar.
Councilmember Alderman, Councilmember Meeks provided his input. The
Sure, I'm just saying I was a no, that's all.
consent calendar was read as is. Are you voting in favor or against the consent calendar?
She's not incorrect, but I don't think there's a yes or no vote. It's consent. There's no up or down vote, right?
True.
Is Mario here? Does he have an opinion?
No, there is an up or down. You either vote for the consent calendar or
The items separate.
or you.
Yeah. Did she vote yea or nay? I don't.
Voted names. Voted no.
Oh, okay, wait.
The consent,
Ms. Alterman, are you voting in favor of the consent calendar or against it?
Against it.
Okay,
Thank
Okay.
you.
thank you.
thank you. The consent calendar is passed. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. That brings us to item
I
7.
think we have to read them. I don't.
Yeah, no,
no.
One person can object to item being on consent.
Right.
sorry?
To do anything. He has to pull the items off.
Pull the items off that she is.
That she.
Oh, you're right, you're right. Right, so Ms. Alterman has pulled all the items off consent. And so
I'm gonna, if I'm allowed, I would vote no to all of them if there's a way to make it.
well, you have to do that one at a time. Right now, you voted no on the consent calendar. And as appropriately pointed out, all the items come off consent.
Don't think that's the case.
So now we go to item 7A1. Ms. Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. Item 1, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Willing, to execute any and all documents necessary to convey a 183 plus square foot utility easement in favor of the second taxing district as and where shown on a certain survey entitled Easement Map depicting easement to be granted to South Norwalk Electric and Water across the property of Norwalk Police Department, number 2, Monroe Street, Norwalk, Connecticut, prepared by Redness and Mead, dated December 12th, 2022. This is an item that passed in committee this past month, went to planning and zoning, passed there.
So Ms. Smith has moved the item. Any discussion?
No.
Seeing no discussion, all in favor of item 7A1? Opposed?
Aye.
Abstained? So Mr. Meek and Ms. Alterman voted in opposition of item 7A1. That brings us to item 7A2. Ms. Smith?
Authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into any and all agreements and other documents necessary to accept a sanitary sewer easement deed over 9 Shorehaven Road, Norwalk, Connecticut, confirming easement rights as set forth in certain compilation plan 9 Shorehaven Road, Norwalk, Connecticut, depicting sanitary sewer easement to be granted to City of Norwalk across the property of Keat Jin Lee, trustee, Linda Ho Lee, trustee, scale 1 inch equals 20 feet, dated January 18th, 2023, and prepared by William W. Seymour and Associates, PC. Again, another item that passed in committee. This is a sewer easement on a private property. This passed in committee, also passed through the Planning and Zoning Commission, and is now here before us.
Thank you. Ms. Smith moves the item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Again, Ms. Alterman and Mr. Meek voted no. Everybody else voted in favor. Next item on the agenda is 7A B1, Mr. Livingston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I need to recuse myself on this item.
Let the record reflect that Ms. Smith has recused herself from this item.
The item is authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute an amendment to the lease agreement with Norwalk Historical Society, Inc. for the Mill Hill Park Complex to extend the lease period retroactively and ending on March 15th, 2039, and to include the old Smith Street Jail and Barn as accessory buildings in the complex. This item relates to a pre-approval of a $50,000 grant that the Norwalk Historical Society has obtained from the state. In order to receive that grant, the state requires that the city extend the lease terms for that property, the Mill Hill property, to include the old Smith Street Jail. And that's what this is. The key terms to that amendment and renewal are set forth in the attached memorandum, which includes the lease being retroactive and expiring on March 15, 2039. We're adding the old Smith Street Jail and Barn to the list of accessory buildings within the Mill Hill Park complex, and just updating Article E of that lease.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. He's moved the item. Any discussion? Seeing that, so basically we're extending the lease in order to accept the grant.
Exactly.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Again, Ms. Alterman and Mr. Meek have opposed this. The motion carries. Mr. Burnett, the Finance and Claims Committee. Oh, yes, she's Ms. Smith.
I just texted her.
Okay.
Thank you. I think she went out.
Yes, you walked out that door.
Yeah.
I just texted her. Texted coming.
Maybe she took the opportunity to escape. We have an escapee on the.
Escape. I think she thought it'd be discussion.
Yeah.
So.
All right, well, Mr. Burnett.
Yes, we'll proceed. Item C.
There she is.
Item C1 on the finance and claims, resolution requesting a special capital appropriation amount of $489,225 to increase the appropriation to fund the fire department to purchase 2 fire engine pump trucks, account noted, apparatus replacement. The $489,225 of bonds or notes of the city shall be issued in accordance with the provisions and terms set forth in the original bond resolutions that authorize the issuance of bonds or notes of the city for the project noted apparatus replacement. And I'd like to move item 2, which goes along with item 1, which reads as follows: resolution deauthorize in the amount of $489,225 of authorized but unissued bonds from the police communication console account as noted to purchase 2 fire engine pumper trucks. This particular item was reviewed by the finance committee. There was excess funds available from the police communication console project, which is still ongoing, but there was funding available to move forward with the greatly needed replacement of these fire engine pump trucks. So we'd like to move forward with these 2 items.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? I don't see, is Mr. Meek, Ms. Shanahan, are you in favor or opposed?
I'm in favor. I'm sorry.
I don't know if Mr. Meek's still with us. I didn't hear Mr. Meek's vote.
I don't see him on Zoom. I don't know.
So Mr. Meek left and Ms. Alterman voted against the fire trucks. So the motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the fiscal year 2023-2024 operating budget and cap review. Mr. Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The item reads as you just mentioned, fiscal year 2023-2024 operating budget and cap review. We've received 2 presentations from our Chief Financial Officer, Henry Dakowitz, in terms of the recommended operating budget. During the Finance and Claims Committee meeting, which was held last week, We did not have the updated grant list numbers to share with the committee. So as a result, we moved that discussion to tonight's meeting. And we have with us our Chief Financial Officer, Henry Dakowitz, along with our Tax Assessor, Bill Ford, to provide us an update on the grant list numbers, as well as address any questions that council members might have related to the budget. Mr. Dakowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to share my screen. Can everyone see it now?
It's not gonna work.
Can you see that now?
Yes, we can.
So we had, Mr. Ford and I are now on version number 5 of all these numbers. The numbers I'm showing you tonight are version number 4, which Mr. Ford gave me over the weekend and which I was able to put through our computer models and distribute to all of you either Sunday night or Monday morning, I forget which. And I will let Mr. Ford talk about why we have had changes to these assessed values. But let me just start by showing you the calculations we make in order to arrive at mill rates and average tax bills. We start up on top here, where we show here are the numbers for, sorry. No.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, is there any way that could be larger? I can't see that.
You can see, you can go like this.
Oh, never mind.
Okay, this is what we call version number 20 of our model with updated, as I say, grand list number 4 and a newly calculated mill rate for the 6 taxing districts. So we start with the Board of Ed expenditures, the City of Norwalk expenditures, and then we have a total, 424.361 million. This is based on the recommendation of the mayor, where the city has an increase expenditures from last year or the current fiscal 23 of 0.75%, and the Board of Ed has an increase of 4% from last year's approved budget. We then have tax adjustments. We have programs where we don't get full payments from veterans or from senior citizens. So if we don't get those taxes, we have to add that to the amount of money we need to raise. We also set up a reserve for uncollected taxes that will be unpaid. We have a very high collection rate of 98.6%, but we still have to take 1.4% of the totals in order to offset the possible non-collection of taxes. That's 5.3 million. When we take the 424 plus the 3.6 million plus the 5.3 million, we get what's known as the gross tax levy, 433.26 million. We then reduce that amount by all the positives or revenues that would offset these expenses. Other tax revenue, we have back taxes and we have supplemental auto. We estimate that to be 5.6 million. The non-tax revenue is composed of things like grants from the state government, the fees and charges that we collect in various departments. It adds up to $37.8 million. The third source of revenue is what we call fund balance transfer. That's a drawdown of our rainy day fund. And we have proposed to use $6 million in fiscal year 24. So if we add the 5.6, the 37.8, and the $6 million, it's about $49 million. So instead of 433.26, we end up with 383.8. That's called the net tax levy. And that's the basis for setting mill rates and average tax bills. So we start by doing the citywide calculation. And according to Mr. Ford's version number 4, the total grand list assessed values for real estate, personal property, as well as motor vehicles was $15.073 billion. We divide through the 383 divided by the 15 billion, and we get 25.46331 to 3 decimals. It would be 25.463 mils. Mils are thousands. That increase is 0.777 from last year. Here's last year's number, 24.686, plus the 0.77 gets you the 25.463. We then also calculate the percent increase. Take the 0.77, divide by the 24.686 to get 3.15%. So what we're saying here is, based on these numbers, the average mill rate for the whole city would be 25.463, an increase of 0.777 mils, or 3.15%. We then take sort of the median for the whole city, the median home value of the 4th taxing district, but just recognize this is an assessed value, not market value. To get the market value, you have to divide by 0.7, because for assessments, we only take 70% of market value. But we're using that as a proxy for the median home value for the whole city. We then take the 25.463 mill rate, we multiply it by the 275,550, and we get an average tax bill for the city of $7,016. Last year, it was $6,802. The increase is $214. And again, because the value of the house didn't change, the 3.15% increase in the mill rate is the same as the 3.15% increase in the tax bill. Okay? Too far. So now that we have the citywide, we start in this column, 10th district. That was the motor vehicles. So Mr. Ford provides a list of the motor vehicle assessed value. It went up significantly. It's over 1 billion, 1.011 billion. And we multiply it by this 30.4670 mill rate, which has not changed in several years. If we take the 1,011 times the 30.4670, we expect that to generate $30.8 million of tax revenue. So what we do is, on the assessed value grand list, we take the 15,073, subtract the 1.0 billion grand list for the motor vehicles. The net 14.061 billion is the grand list for the 6 districts. And we will use that to calculate the mill rates and average tax bills for real estate and personal property. Real estate and personal property are both at the same mill rate, so it doesn't matter what the split is here. At the same time, we take the 30.8 million expected taxes to be raised and reduce the net tax levy. The net tax levy was 383 million. But if we're collecting 30 million from motor vehicles, we need to set mill rates to generate $352.997 million. Okay. The next step in the process, we then have to adjust the numbers because not all districts all get the same services. And those services are fire service, garbage, trash, and street lighting. The 6th taxing district provides all of those services to their residents. What they do is they ask us to charge a mill rate for the services they provide, and we include it in the bills for residents in the 6th taxing district. And when the money comes in, we just give it to the 6th taxing district to offset their expenses. And I work with the treasurer of the 6th taxing district to ensure that based on the grand list for the 6th taxing district, $1.528 billion times this mill rate gets them the numbers they need for revenue. We take the fire costs that we calculate, the cost to the city of providing fire service. And the first 5 districts, excluding the 6th, all pay for fire services. So we say, okay, this is $27.987 million. We look at the grand list up above for the first 5 taxing districts. So instead of using the 14 billion for all 6 districts, we take the sum of those 5 districts and divide the 27 million for fire divided by the grand list for the 5 districts, and we end it with, this is how much money each of the districts will be taxed. And here's my proof. The 5 add up to the 27 million. We do the same for trash. It's 2,115,000. We take that 2,115,000 and we spread it across the first 4 tax districts. The 5th and 6th do not receive garbage trash pickup from the city. Last, we have the lighting, street lighting. We identified that as $628,000, and it gets allocated only to the 4th and 5th districts. Again, we have the proof. So these 3 carve-outs added up to 30,731,000. And just as we deducted the 30.8 from the total that we had to generate from the net tax levy, we will now subtract the 30,731 from the 352. We first take these amounts and put it into mill rate form, but this core allocation, 322 million, let me just remind you how we got it. Net tax levy was 383, minus the 30.8 million, which we expect to get from motor vehicle taxes, minus the 30.7 million, which we will get, but not all districts pay for all those 3 items. The net of 322 million is what we call core, and all 6 districts must generate taxes to cover that. This is where we would take the sum of the 6 districts. The grand list for those 6 districts adds up to 14.06 billion. We're trying to generate $322.266 million. We divide the 322 by the 14 billion, and we get a core mill rate for all 6 districts. We then add the mill rates for fire, garbage, and lighting if the districts get those services. And then just for the 6th taxing district, we add the amount that they're charging that we collect on their behalf.
And Mr. Dakowitz, if I can ask just for a moment, there was an indication that the grand list numbers that we were given might be off a little. Is that still the case?
It's not that it was off. As we've mentioned, Mr. Ford got an extension on the deadline to supply the state with the grand list.
Right.
And though he gave me numbers on Sunday, tonight, which is the deadline, his numbers changed a bit. So what I will be doing is I will be redoing these charts with the latest and greatest grand list numbers. We want to get this as accurate as possible. And we go through the model to get you those numbers. I apologize for all the changes. Next year, we will make sure that the Common Council meets for this review on March 7th, which is the deadline according to the charter. And by that time, we will have final grand list numbers instead of all these changes.
But right now, we don't have the final numbers.
This is the next to last set. The numbers that were prepared for this evening were filed with the state. And that's what we're going to have to use, but you do have a week to deliberate because the date of setting the cap has been moved to March 7th. And I will get them out and circulated by tomorrow morning.
Ms. Ayers?
Henry, here we are yet again. I feel like Demi Moore in bad lighting. Kids
What she?
do not understand.
What she said?
And I'm really trying to be sensitive here about the procedure and what you and Bill Ford are trying to do. When you stood in front of the Finance Committee, you asked us for grace because Bill Ford had submitted for an extension and was granted for an extension. I made comments, you had a rebuttal. But when I went to the University of Connecticut and finished my undergrad at Sacred Heart University and then got a master's and now in a doctoral program, and I simply understand that 2 + 2 = 4, this foolishness that you present to us week after week after week is ad nauseum. You cannot expect for the city to accept your below par reaction and work. I cannot speak to the council or the people who sat in these beautiful seats before I did. But what I can say to you is, this is not acceptable yet again. The finance calendar is set by you in your office, but you can't uphold your own deadlines. Then you give us these numbers that you said was coming. We are all like little kids waiting for these numbers to come. For you then to go through this presentation, knowing that the presentation is wrong, but I give you kudos for sticking right through it to present to us numbers that you know are going to change just to save face. What I'm going to say, and I know my colleagues have other things to say, I have lost complete and utter faith in you and the ability for you and Bill Ford to give us true numbers for us to do our job. I have completely no faith that you are able to give us tangible numbers from real data. And you keep saying, I have to put it in the computer. I have to put it in the computer. Could you get a calculator and maybe do it with a calculator so we don't have to worry about the computer and spitting out all these crazy numbers that you keep telling us version 5 is coming down the pipeline. We're going to be up to 12 o'clock at night trying to do the best for this city with numbers that you don't even have faith with. And so, Mr. Dakowich, with all respect, I have lost faith in you. And I have lost faith in your ability to run the city's financial department. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to speak.
Mr. Goldstein? Mr. Burnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Dakowitz, can you, based on the slide that you are currently displaying on the screen, can you highlight to the council what numbers you are anticipating might change?
Yes, these 7 numbers. The 10th district does not change. It's these 6 numbers. The assessed value for each of the districts. Maybe Mr. Ford can elaborate, please.
Mr. Ford, if you're speaking, you're still muted.
And while we're waiting for Mr. Ford, as a follow-up question, are the changes that you anticipate that might be made to the grand list by districts going to have any impact on the operating budget cap?
No. The answer is the operating budget cap are the top three numbers that I went over. How much is the budget for the city? How much is the budget for the Board of Ed, and what's the total? That's what the budget cap is. Everything else, my understanding, is decided by the Board of Estimate and Taxation.
Does my question, so do these numbers?
I'm sorry. I'm trying to confirm. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The bottom line, it says FY 24% change in tax bill. That bottom line, I understood, is going up based on what the new numbers look like?
That's my understanding.
Yes.
Okay.
Bill, now that we can hear you, why don't you explain what the changes were before Sunday and what the changes have been today, please?
So as I believe most people are aware, we upgraded our financial management system, Munis. Starting in September, October, we had the majority of that upgraded. For the tax and assessor's office, we continued those upgrades through December. At the same time, we were converting to a new assessment administration system called Quality Data Systems. And we've been working on the conversion of the data into that system. We had all of the personal property and motor vehicle done, and we were working through on getting all the real estate converted over. We discovered some issues with properties that were exempt or should have been exempt that were identified as taxable. And once we made all of the corrections necessary, we filed the assessment roll, the grand list today. We have the new numbers, and they're provided tonight. Well, they're not provided to council tonight because we didn't have the opportunity to upgrade this information yet. But the new numbers will be available in the morning.
Greg, Mr. Burnett, do you have any further questions or comments?
No,
Josh, you
No, go ahead. I'll go after.
So, the unacceptable nature of sitting here, having the public come to speak, having us have the time to digest this information and make determinations based on assessments that we don't have. Are you saying that the grand list numbers have gone down so that the tax rates need to go up in order to make the number play out the way you have it here? Mm-hmm. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
So mill rates are going up from where we are now, based on the
Yes,
numbers
sir.
that you got today.
The numbers I have today reduce these numbers by 0.75 of 1%.
Wow. Okay. That's not insignificant of a number.
So basically, I understand we're going to have a special meeting on March 7th in order to set the cap. Once we have the numbers, and Mr. Ford and Mr. Dakowitz indicates those numbers will be available tomorrow for the council review. Mr. Jewelski?
We'll absolutely have them tomorrow, and they will be published so the public can see them, so they can comment on them, so that by next week, we can actually sit in this room and have you finally present this, and we can finally make a determination.
I will say again, the error was in setting these finance and council before March. According to my staff, that was the original date that was scheduled, just as we did last year. But for some reason, something happened and moved the dates earlier. I don't know who or why, but that was the mistake. Mr. Ford requested an extension to February 28th, and he has met that deadline. And it would seem to me the key is to get the most accurate data at all times when we have it available. And you will have a full week to contemplate it, review it, and then vote next Tuesday night.
Mr. Goldstein?
I thought it's my understanding that it's always the pattern and practice of this process that the cap is set typically on the second Tuesday of February. So to have an October surprise like this in February is wholly unacceptable and frankly amateur hour. And we, as a lot of people commented tonight, have an obligation to make as cogent a decision as possible. But the contingent on that is making sure that we are informed and not surprised in the middle of a public meeting with updated figures. Mr. Dakowitz, I think you said a few moments ago that essentially, I think the words were, we have a week to, I don't even know, essentially get it together before we make a decision that we're required to make by March 7th, I believe by either charter or law, if I'm not mistaken. That's true. By charter. It's true. Let me make it clear that you don't have a week. Hey. Because that isn't enough time for us to do what we need to do. And, an obligation that we took on as elected members of this common council. So if there is a change in the mill rate, if there is a change in the grand list, and I understand that the grand list numbers have been filed, and I understand that we're going to get them tomorrow, but I need to understand on the record that there is not going to be a subsequent change. Is there any reason why there would be a subsequent change?
No, the grand list was filed today with the state. The deadline was met, and the only changes that have been made for a week now were assessed value changes. Nothing else has changed. The amount of spending has not changed since the mayor's recommended budget 3 weeks ago. The only changes are the assessments which affect the mill rates and average tax bill for each district.
Which is an important part of the
Counselor, can I-
decision we have to make.
One at a time, please. Wait, through the chair, please. Ms. Smith.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is my 6th budget cycle here on the Common Council. I have been following the school budget for 15 years, 12 years. I've never seen anything like this. We always set the cap on the second meeting of February. We are required by charter to set it no later than March 7th. I can't say any more in terms of, my feelings and how irritated and angry I am right now, but this is unacceptable.
Ms. McMurray?
I don't have anything further to add to this. I really want to move on and ask questions and have a deep conversation about the budget. And so we can get what answers we can. Mr. Dakowitz, you had sent us an email, I believe yesterday or the day before, about $1 million revenue and then spending. And I would just like some clarification on that and where that came from, where that revenue is being generated, what that scenario looks like, because I didn't feel like there was a lot of context behind it.
The scenarios were there to run through the model so that if you change the cap and you increase it to increase spending, I wanted to run through the model to show you what the impact would be district by district for both mill rates and the average tax bill. If you, for example, if you want to increase it by $10 million, you could just take that column, multiply it by 10, and you would understand how the mill rate and the average tax bill would change. I did it also in case you identified additional revenue. Again, using $1 million number, which allows for convenient multiplication to figure out if you have a different amount of revenue that is increasing. It was a tool to help you try to come to a decision on the cap.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think we will be utilizing that tool. I think many of us would like to see different scenarios in terms of spending and revenue. I think that's something we'd be very interested in. So we will take that into consideration, use that tool.
Well, I was planning on updating the model that I was showing you earlier to reflect the new assessed values. And then at the same time, updating that spreadsheet that shows the alternate scenarios if you increase by 1 million or decrease by 1 million. And I was planning on distributing both of those spreadsheets updated for the latest and last sets of numbers for this year.
Ms. Alderman?
I just wanted clarity that this wasn't being voted on tonight.
No.
No, I mean, I'm sorry. I got it from someone else. I got it from Ms. King.
Mr. Meek, I didn't catch your vote on the fire truck issue. I don't know if you were in.
I was gonna vote in solidarity with my compatriot from District D, no, but I lost my connection, so I rebooted. So I was a no on everything. I was approving the consent calendar because they were basically just transfers. But since she pulled everything off consent, I took opportunity.
Okay.
I do have some questions for the
Yep,
finance.
you've got the floor.
Thanks. Notwithstanding rounding errors on the grand list, which I understand will sort themselves out, hopefully within a day or two to satisfy everyone else. I want to move forward to future years. And let me preface this from my experience on the school board, where we used to provide the city with a 3-year forecast of expenditure, you know, to the best of our ability to guess what might happen. And my biggest concern heading into this spend is that the teacher contract is up for negotiation. It expires August of this year. And I'm just curious. I haven't heard anything, but I'm guessing in an 8% inflationary environment, they're not going to come in asking for 2%. Has anybody heard about where the teacher contract might land, where we might end up next year? So that's one question.
I'll just check on that because I know that Jim Frere from the Board of Estimate and Taxation just sat in on a lot of negotiations for the Board of Education. I don't know if that was including the teachers, but I'll find out.
All right, because I would expect them, from my experience, for them to come in and ask for an 8% increase immediately. Does finance have any feedback on that?
No. Well, I'll check that out tomorrow.
Okay, and then looking at most concerning to me in this budget is our debt service is 10%, and you know, I panic at home when I start paying more than 5% a year. And I know this is operational budget, but it is kind of connected. I know we've compartmentalized operating versus CapEx forever. Just like we have a February 28th date of our budget presentation from 100 years ago in the 21st century now. But it's over 10%, our debt expenditure. It's just going to grow and grow and grow. Do we have a forecast of that 5 years out? Maybe this is coming forth in the CapEx conversation, but in a 1 or 2% interest rate environment, I don't think we talked about this for the last 15, 20 years, but we're up in 4 and 5% right now. It's significant.
Mr. Dakowitz, address
Yeah,
that issue?
I would say that after we borrow money every summer, our financial advisor revises his schedules, including the debt service schedule, which for the last number of years, we've been borrowing money over a 30-year term, because when you build schools for 40 or 50 years, it's appropriate financially to borrow for a term that matches the useful life of the asset. So we have schedules of debt service as of today on exactly what we're going to have to make in payments principal plus interest for the total debt service for the next 30 years. And obviously, the amount of debt that we have has increased significantly. Last summer, we borrowed $82 million. And also, the rates that we have to pay for this debt have increased. So it's not surprising that the debt service went up by $5 million from last year's budget to this year, from 35 million to a little bit over 40 million.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Majewski Eichner.
Thank you, Mayor Rilling. So I have a number of comments that I want to make, and in particular, I wanted to try to explain a few things contextually for our parents who I think have been incredibly patient and have spoken to us with great passion and great commitment, and yet have not yet had an opportunity to hear a lot of their concerns addressed. And I think that Mr. Jackowitz, I appreciate, the breakdown of the mill rates. I look forward to having accurate ones, as I think is a really core and important part of our budget discussion. But I want to back up a little bit and try to help contextualize some of the reasons that our council are so particularly concerned about getting accurate tax rates here and really understanding the impacts. So a lot of our parents spoke about the importance of diversity. It was a huge component of my decision to move to Norwalk. It's a huge component of why I live here, why I love living here. As a member of this council, I have to think every day, particularly in the budget context, about what it takes to maintain diversity of this city. This is a city where we are incredibly lucky to have an enormous range of income from low to high. And we are incredibly lucky to have an enormously successful and stable community of a lot of working families who make significantly less than a living wage for the city. So as our housing costs in Norwalk have skyrocketed, the living wage for Norwalk is now higher than our median household income for Norwalk. That means that more than half of our city is already housing burdened, and property taxes are an important part of that housing burden. They affect homeowners, but they also affect renters because they are passed through in rental income. So we, as a city council that is deeply concerned about maintaining the diversity of the city, maintaining the city as a place where people can afford to live, a place where we are an aspirational city for our immigrant families, for our working families, have to really consider the burden that we're placing on our families with our property taxes. That does not mean that our schools are not worth investing in. That does not mean that we are not deeply committed to our schools, but it means it is a balancing act that we have to wrestle with in this budget process. That is why you're hearing all the council members obsessively concerned about getting accurate information about the impact of the tax rates on the median home values for each taxing district, because that is really how we can assess how fair these increases are and what their impact is likely to be on our residents. To go a little bit further than that, I want to also comment on the number of excellent suggestions that we have heard about how we could think about changing our revenue resources and how we could approach this differently from a revenue perspective. What I think is not always transparent to parents, was not obvious to me, quite frankly, before I joined the council, is that Connecticut has some of the most restrictive laws on municipal revenues of any place in the nation. This has a large part to do with our historical, in my opinion, absurd decision to get rid of counties and the way that that was handled back in the 1950s. But there is a consequence, and this is no knock on our state delegation, who works tirelessly to try to find ways to bring more revenue to Norwalk, but we are essentially limited to a single property tax rate for all personal and real property, regardless of income or ability to pay, regardless of the value of that property. We cannot increase the amount of tax credits that we provide our low-income residents. That is set by state law. We cannot raise it. We cannot increase our local sales tax. We cannot impose a local hotel tax. We cannot increase local transfer taxes. So again, it is not a lack of respect or investment for education. It is absolutely no disrespect to the parents who are coming to speak to us. It is literally a decision where we are trying to figure out how we can support all of our residents and maintain the diversity of the city that we so value, and not drive out the very students and family we are most trying to help with property tax rates that increase what we can pay. So I just want to provide that context to this whole conversation, why we are also frustrated about the accuracy here, but also why this is a decision that is really wrenching for all of us. We understand the needs. It is not any lack of understanding of the needs. It is the fear that the very students who most need these services are the students who will be further traumatized by evictions, by loss of housing, by our inability to invest in affordable housing because we are investing in our school system. It is a trade-off that we are trying to figure out how to make. As Mr. Meeks just pointed out, we have enormously increased our capital spending in the city. This is because our schools were underinvested in, because our school buildings were falling apart. But that is capital funding we are investing in our school buildings as opposed to in affordable housing. So we are really trying to weigh and balance these trade-offs here. And I just want to start this conversation from that perspective of saying to the parents, we very much hear you. We very much respect your perspective. We are not at all disrespectful of education or the future of our children. We are merely trying to make sure our children can continue to afford to live here. So I just wanted to start our conversation from that perspective. And I will.
Thank you, Mrs. Jilski-Eichner.
Can I just say?
Yes, Ms. Young.
I don't have a lot to say to that, but I thank you, Nora, for putting that. This is not an easy decision and there are a lot of moving parts. So I really appreciate you and hope that the parents can take that into consideration as we all move forward to try to make decisions in the best interest of for everybody. As you said, we are not against children. We're not against education. We love Norwalk and we want to make sure that we can do the right thing moving forward. So I really appreciate you bringing that forward.
Mr. Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Dakowitz, I understand that the grand list numbers need to be updated. However, do you by any chance have a model that you can display that would show what the projected tax increases across the 6 districts would look like if we were to provide the $27 million request to the Board of Education? What the increases would look like in each of the districts? Do you have that available by any chance?
Yes, let me share my screen. So here is a different model that shows, no, this is the old one. I'm sorry. Let me see if I can find this thing. There you go. So this is the same model, but the numbers that we put into it are Board of Education 12.69%, their request 245.5 million, and the city 0.75%, the same 197 million. So the total cap of those expenditures would be $443 million. We can then go down under that scenario, the net tax levy is 403 million. According to the model that I showed you before, the net tax levy was 383.8 million. So this is an additional $20 million. The 10th district doesn't change. But let's go down to the values by district, which I didn't get to, but you can now see it. Okay, first district is column J. So for the first district, move up a little bit. The total mill rate would be 26.7117, an increase of 2.169 or 8.84%. The average tax bill in the district would be $6,415, an increase of $521 or 8.85%. The mill rates for the first three districts, as I explained before, they get the same services. So the increase is the same, but the average home value, median home assessed value changes by district. So the average tax bill in the second district, $6,075, an increase of $493, 8.84%. In the third district, the average assessed value is $304,840. The average bill will be $8,143, an increase of $661, 8.84%. In the fourth district, the mill rate is 26.7877, increased by 8.49%. The average tax bill, $7,381, an increase of $578, 8.5%. The fifth tax district, 26.5923, an increase of 8.22%. The average tax bill would be $9,994, an increase of $759, 8.22%. The sixth taxing district, the mill rate would be 25.5559, an increase of 11.44%. And the average tax bill would be $19,543, an increase of $2,005 or 11.43%.
Is that based on the incorrect grand list?
Well, that's the question of, my follow-up question is, Mr. Dakowitz, do you anticipate with the updated grand list numbers that you're going to provide that these numbers will go up or down?
Based on my discussions with Mr. Ford, his last change to the assessed values is going down because there were exemptions that had to be included. So if the grand list goes down, the mill rate has to go up to generate the same amount of tax revenue. So these numbers will go up based on the new numbers I expect to plug in tomorrow morning.
Mr. Livingston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nora, thank you for your comments. I want to follow up a little bit on those because I think it's really important that the parents and all the residents understand as much as we can possibly explain. One of the things we have to think about as we do this are future years. As Mr. Meek pointed out, the debt service is going to increase next year and the following year. Mr. Dakowitz, you have a number of increasing $5 million in this budget. What do you anticipate it to go up in the following year, FY 24-25? Do you have a number for that?
Yes, according to the numbers, well, actually, the debt service will decline year by year. Next year would be 39.0 million. After that, 36.7. However, when we borrow money this summer, that gets added to the debt service that we already have. So consequently, with the new borrowing, we would expect the numbers to go up, but I don't know how much we're going to borrow. I don't know what interest rate we're going to get, but I would expect the debt service to go up. Maybe not as much as it did this year. I don't expect to borrow $82 million worth, but generally, we are borrowing more and interest rates are not where we were a couple of years ago, 1.75 or 2%. We're looking in the last year, we borrowed at a rate of 3.6. And based on what I see, but the summer is far away, we might be at 4% plus or minus, depending upon the markets.
Okay, and this current budget, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, includes a number of one-time sources of revenues, right? Like the 5.3 for employee health insurance copay and about 4 to 5 million in the OPEB.
The OPEB was 8 or 9 million.
Right, but you're anticipating next year it'd be less, right?
Well, I'm anticipating an increase. So it went down by 8 or 9, and I expect it to go up by 5 or 6 million for next year. Yes.
So if we take the 5.3 and we're talking starting next year in a hole, right? Of a significant hole, 10 plus million is, and we're gonna have to make up.
Right. I mean, if both sides, the city and the Board of Ed, had a 0% flat funding next year, we'd still have to find that extra money that we expect to go up for debt service and for the OPEB and the usual, the pension contributions, et cetera.
Right, and that's the point I want to make. So every dollar, if we increase this budget, increase the cap, it's more money we're going to have to make up next year, the following year, and every subsequent year.
Well, there's also the distinction between the Board of Ed expenses and the city. By law in Connecticut, there's a minimum budget requirement for Board of Ed. So whatever dollars we give them as an increase this year, that becomes the base and foundation and minimum for subsequent years.
Right, and that's the next point I was going to make. And you know, assuming the grand list will grow, but if you know, I think our experience says it may not grow that fast. But we're also in possible recession, right?
Yes.
And so, if I just want that point made, I'm going to leave it at that. I think it's important that people understand the implications of additional spending. Should we decide to increase the cap, will have on our long-term financial situation.
May I make one more comment? There were some speakers who talked about priorities. Budgeting is priorities, and we show our priorities. I would just remind everyone not to just look at the increases year to year, but the fact is that out of our local taxes, the Board of Ed is getting 60% of the money. Obviously, that's much more than any other department. So it would seem to me that's a good indication that the Board of Ed is, and the schools are, the #1 priority for the city.
Ms. McMurray?
Thank you very much. And I hear what my colleague, Mr. Livingston, is saying, and I want to thank Ms. Najelski-Eichner for her comments too. We've had a lot of discussions about these very things and the challenges that lay before us. I want to circle back to something that keeps coming up, which is the flat funding 2 years ago. I think that, you know, looking back on it as a parent, that was one of the main drivers that led me to this seat and this role, was the education budget. And I think I would be remiss not to bring that up. I am struggling with this particular budget over last year's because we are faced with such great challenges on both sides, the city side and the school side, although I would argue that we are all on the same side. I think that what I need to sort of focus on this budget, and I wish I would have thought about it last year, but once again, I was very new when we were doing the budget last year and very green, is I think we need to at some point talk about a strategy for making up that flat funding. No other district was flat funded that year. I don't hold it against anyone. We were facing uncertain times. I don't know that I would have done anything different if I was in this seat and not a parent alone. But with that said, I think that we are very reactive a lot of times, and I think we need to be proactive when it comes to the budget as much as we possibly can. As Ms. Najelski-Eichner pointed out so graciously, we are faced with a lot of restrictions. There is not a lot of power we have in changing the revenue stream and the taxes. But I do think we need to do a better job being strategic about our budget moving forward. So I don't know if it's plausible to make up that flat funding this year or over the next 2 years, but I would ask us to seriously consider that, because I think that will go a long way to getting us closer to where we need to be and meeting in the middle. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Ms. Smith?
Yes, thank you, Ms. McMurray. I would like to add to that. I was quite upset 2 years ago when the BET flat funded the Board of Education. At that time, we approved a cap that included a 3.3% increase for the Board of Ed. And while I absolutely understand the circumstances and the desire to give relief to our residents, I do believe that it was a mistake. Even if we would have been able to do like 2% or something, just to, sort of keep things afloat. And I do agree that we need to make that up. This is by far the most difficult budget season I have experienced, and emotions are running really high. Each year when I vote, I taught in this system for 12 years. I know where we were when I started, and I know where we've come to, and the commitment that the city has had to our school budget has been profound compared to where we've been. Each year, it started when I was a teacher in the building, and I saw, I lived it, right? I saw that we were getting the resources that we needed. Now, since I have no longer been teaching, I rely on what I hear from my former colleagues in the buildings. And when I hear, from, Mary York, who stands here representing the teachers, from Lynn Moore, who, who has been a fearless and avid supporter of our kids and our schools. When I hear from them that 4% isn't enough, that's really meaningful to me. That's really, and so that tells me 4% isn't enough. And I know what our kids were struggling with before the pandemic, and I know very well the crisis, and listening to some of the parents, it's been really hard. I have children. I have 2 sons who suffer with extreme anxiety. I know what they've been through. This has been just so hard. So I don't know how we do it. I don't know if we, maybe, I'm hearing that, the mill rate is going to be higher, that the burden on the taxpayer is going to be higher just at 4%. How do we do this? I would like to, plead to the Board of Estimate Taxation to look at the possibility of drawing down from the fund balance a little bit more. I know we're at 6 million. Can we go to 7 million? I don't know. That's what the BET does, and that's what they're experts at. I don't know if it's realistic. I think of, some of the partnerships that we have, and Nikki, thank you for your focus on partnerships. It takes a village to raise our kids, and these are our kids, and we need to wrap our arms around our kids and make sure that they have the services that they need. And I think of the services that they're getting in the schools. Why I heard it said tonight, some kids don't get services unless they get them in school, and that, they don't get the mental health support that they need unless they're at least identified in school. So, I don't have any answers tonight. It's excruciating, frankly. So, but I would like to see if there's some way we can, increase that percentage a little bit, if we can go to the BET with a little more money, or ask for that. I don't know. This is just really hard.
Mr. Goldstein.
I really deeply appreciate the comments of my colleagues. And I think that in the spirit of context, there are 2 things that come to mind. I think one, and I really thank all of you who are in the audience right now who've been here for almost 3.5 hours, or 3 hours. I saw a number of students in the audience tonight. I think that's a wonderful thing, because those students tonight got a real lesson in the power of the local democratic process, and the understanding that while people might have divergent opinions, they're in this room because they care about Norwalk, which all of us here on this panel certainly do. It's why we devote the time and and you can literally see it on our faces that we are agonizing over the decision, because it's not just one decision, it is a series of decisions about the fate of our city. And one thing that I think about in terms of, I think Nora said this very well about how we are dealing with a series of generational challenges, and that we are working to fix. I mean, everything from adequate school construction to affordable housing and using innovative partnerships to do that. That's an important series of moves that we made, and with great help from our state and federal delegation, we've been able to make strides in that. But I also want to assert, and I think just for the parents in here, just so they understand, they probably already do, so forgive me if this is redundant. This is a collaborative process between multiple branches of local government. We have by charter, we have a very limited scope of power, which is that we get to set the cap. We do not have any oversight on how your money is spent in the Board of Education. We can't do line item appropriations. That is, we are literally restricted from doing that. So while I enormously appreciate it, and the advocacy is absolutely warranted, make sure you also show up for the Board of SMS and Taxation, but honestly, most importantly, make sure you show up to the Board of Education and hold them to account for how the money, your tax money, is spent. Because whatever number cap we set it at, it's the decisions made by the Board of Education that really are the most, on the ground level, the most effective to your students' education. And we are restricted by law from weighing in on those decisions. The spirit, and I think that the wonderful thing about local government is that it's not just one body making all the rules. I think that's actually a really good thing. But I just want to make sure that people know that we are agonizing this decision because the biggest thing that we focus on is the tax rate, because that's what we have to decide. And that affects lots of people from lots of different walks of life, and in sometimes collateral consequences that we sometimes are hard to conceive, even for those of us who have to make this decision on our own. So I really appreciate that you're here. I really appreciate your fidelity to the city and integrity in the process. And we're going to spend a tough week really trying to make the best decision we can for the city.
Mr. Hoovelman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to say, first of all, thank you to everyone who came out and spoke tonight, those that were here in the gallery and those that were virtually speaking. A lot of really heartfelt things were said, and we were listening. I just want to thank my colleagues for the comments that were made. Ms. Najelski-Eichner was, very laid out very well where we're sort of at. Mr. Livingston, the reality of, even though we're looking at numbers that may not be completely accurate, the reality of doing the 12% hike and what it would mean to the taxes across the board for our community. And I look at my own district and I see numbers that are untenable for people who live in that district. And we have to be careful of that. And my colleague, Mr. Goldstein, just said something that really struck me. And that is that we are one part of this process, this body here. But the budget that we're here discussing as the driver of all of this comes out of NPS and the Board of Ed. And I would urge you, all of you here and all of you in Zoom, that you attend those meetings, that you ask the same questions that you are asking us about the spending of the money. Ask that of the Board of Ed. We need to have that oversight, because by the time it comes here, we're handed a book. This book with a bunch of numbers in it, and we ask questions about them and we get lots of answers about those questions. But the truth of the matter is when the bucket is filled by the BET, we don't have the control over what that money gets spent on. And that's a reality. And so I would urge you to attend those meetings as well, because it's part of the partnership that exists here. And that it's not just this body, it's all of that. And that's all I have to say.
Ms. Ayers?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am gonna say some comments about the Norwalk Public School System, but before I make those comments, I just want us to think about a department on the city side who, one of the speakers today said that we nickel and dime the Board of Ed. In all actuality, we nickel and dime the city a lot more than we nickel and dime the Board of Ed. And there's empirical evidence to prove that we really do nickel and dime the city side a lot more than we do the Board of Ed. I have some major concerns on this evening about our IT department and the lack of funding in our IT department. In the recommended budget, it's about $700,000 increase, which would cover, I believe, one employee, which is a webmaster. A city of our size not to have sufficient cyber security is concerning. Many people have referenced the efficiency study. One part of the efficiency study said that the city's IT was a big issue. So it has been said, we have tough decisions, but we cannot continue to strangle the IT department and expect us to be able to have Zoom and protect city data and all that stuff. We need to really increase the funding in the IT department. Even with the increase of the webmaster, that person, whoever that person is going to be, they're gonna have the job to handle the website and all that stuff, but that is separate from securing the devices and securing what we have. And what has been presented in this current budget is not sufficient enough to do that work. So I would bring that to the public's attention. I believe the budget is there for you to peruse. It's around page 19. I think 17 to 19 covers the IT department or the lack thereof. When I think about MPS and the Board of Ed, I tell people my most important job is I'm a parent. That's my most important job. This other stuff we do is great, but I live and die on the strength of what I've poured into my children. At public participation, I was a parent who's extremely active, still active in the communities in which my children go to school in. I know administrators personally. I know staff personally. They are some of my dearest friends. So I am fortunate enough to partner with Norwalk Public School System in my day job. And there is a need. I'm not gonna say that there is not a need. There definitely is a need. But for parents, any parents to think that myself and my colleagues, the one in the chamber and the ones in Zoom land are not invested, it's not true. We are overly invested. We do care about not only the children, but the staff and the atmosphere of our schools. But there are some hard questions to be asked. You've done your job, you've done your due diligence, but there's some real hard questions to be asked. And I hear a lot of people saying, when I have the option of moving out of the city of Norwalk, what about those many residents that do not have that option to move out of the city of Norwalk? Those many residents that are renters and do not have the option of deciding to sell their house and go to a more affluent neighborhood. Those are the residents that I really think about and how these things are impacting them. And as my colleague said, this mill rate is is something that we have to process and we have to digest. Myself and none of my colleagues are backing down from the challenge that has been presented in front of me. That's why I was so frustrated earlier. I was so frustrated earlier. But I have to say that I do not agree with the recommendation that was set at 4%, but I do not agree that we can afford a 7.9%. And most people understand that that 12.7% is just not tangible. It just is not tangible. So we have to do our due diligence and we have to do our work and we have to figure it out. And we're not going to make everybody happy. Many people say, how do you handle this? Because I do my best and I leave my best at this table. So when I walk away from this table, my conscience is clean because I've given you my best. And that's what you have asked me to do, my best. My best does not mean that you're going to get everything you want. And I'm going to get everything I want, but it means that I showed up and I did the job and I did it to the best of my ability. So I have to, again, not only advocate for a slight increase to the Board of Education, but I'm advocating vigorously for us to fully fund the suggestions that were given in the efficiency study around the IT department and cybersecurity and our lack of having those things. Lastly, I would like to say the rainy day fund. Mr. Dakowicz, if you could please, for a point of clarity and information, I've heard it been suggested and presented several times that taking more money out of the rainy day fund jeopardizes our AAA bonding. I understand that. I do not need that to be clarified anymore. What I need to be clarified is the definition of emergency. What do we consider an emergency? Because I've heard people say, well, it's an emergency, it's an emergency. If you could spend some time and explain what is considered or classified as an emergency, it would be the best practices to tap the rainy day fund.
Could you direct that to me? Do you want me to answer that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think the way the rating agencies look at the rainy day fund, remember, they are charged with evaluating our finances and giving us a rating every time we issue new bonds. And they are there to protect the investors. And their concern is, what is the probability or possibility that the borrower, in this case, the city of New York, will not be able to make principal and interest payments?
Did you just say New York?
City of Norwalk.
Oh, I live in Connecticut.
You don't live in Norwalk?
Connecticut, different state. That's okay. Keep going, Henry. It's all right.
Everyone's a little tired. We're all getting a little punchy.
It's okay. Keep going. But he said New York.
Thank you. So they look at all these finances. They look at our annual financial statements, the 150-page book. They look at our budget books of 325 pages. They look at something called an official statement, which is another 200 pages. And they go through all of these numbers and they test us based on the actions that are made by the mayor, the council, the Board of Estimate and Taxation, the Board of Education. And they come to a judgment of what is the possibility and probability that the city may not be able to make payments as scheduled. The rainy day fund is there as an insurance contract. Their attitude is, well, if everything gets out of whack and for some reason we can't make those payments, well, we could always look at the $74.9 million that's sitting on the balance sheet to make those payments. So consequently, when they decide how creditworthy we are, that's an important factor, especially as we have $360 million of debt outstanding now, which will increase with next summer's borrowings. And we have debt service that's already closing in on 10% of our operating expenses. Those are all risk factors. We have a lot of debt, and our ratio of debt service to the total operating expenses is getting close to where AA entities in Connecticut are. This was the analysis that was done a year ago by our financial advisor. So there's no fast and absolute rule. Okay, we have used that to help us get through COVID, and we were fortunate that we didn't have to draw down all the monies that we've budgeted, but we planned to, and we expected it. And when we go to the rating agencies every summer, they are pleased to see that we have this rainy day fund and that our numbers are pretty good. But obviously they will say we are getting pressure from our fixed commitments on debt service, on pension contributions, and on OPEB. So I can't give you a number of where it should be. I could tell you that when we said we're using it to draw down money because of COVID and one-time expenses that might not get reimbursed, they thought that was an appropriate use of our rainy day fund. When we say we're drawing down the rainy day fund to lower the taxes on citizens for regular operating expenses, they don't look as favorably upon that because they think regular operating expenses should be paid for by regular revenue streams and the taxes that we have. So can we reduce it? Sure. It's up to the mayor and your good selves, the council and the BET, to decide what the right drawdown is. I'm just saying that's something that's a risk when we go to the credit rating agencies.
So there is no, I just want to be clear, there is no list, there is no definition of what the emergency has to be. I just want to be clear on that.
Absolutely. I don't know of any list that says these are acceptable drawdown matters and these are not. It's more of a judgment looking at the overall financial health of the city.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Mr. Joseph Gagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So before I speak more to the school's budget, I do want to echo my colleague, Ms. Ayers, particularly on the IT side. I think the efficiency study was very clear on our need for more investment there, particularly in the security space. And I think that it is really crucial that we be as sort of functional for our citizenry as possible. And IT is these days sort of a core part of providing these services. If we have services available, they're so often accessed through IT. So I too would support considering, and again, this is in many senses more of a recommendation to the BET, but I would really like to see some cap increase used for, or I would like to see us make a cap increase for use for IT services. I would like the BET to allocate more there. I will also note that these SROs, the school resource officers in this budget proposal appear to go down from 8 to 5. I know this is also a question that comes up frequently for parents. And I think is another place outside of this technically out of the school side of the school's budget that we may need to consider whether an increase to the cap to cover those would be appropriate. I conversely want to really thank you, Mayor, for the additional zoning enforcement officer. That's something that had been a real priority of a number of members of this council. I was really thrilled to see that in the budget. And I think maybe I'll use that as a transition point to my further comments on the school budget. So since fiscal year 18-19, the city has increased its full-time equivalent positions by 32. In that same period of time, the school has increased its full-time equivalent positions by 377. This is not a criticism of our school system, right? I too, I'll cut to the chase by saying I too think that 4% is not high enough. And I would like us to find a number that is above 4%, but is also under 12.7%. And in wrestling with trying to understand what that means, I found looking at the full-time equivalent positions helpful to understand exactly what we're grappling with here. So 377 positions since fiscal year 18-19 is a lot of positions. In fiscal year 18-19, we were at 1,526 full-time equivalent positions. That's approximately equivalent to the national average for a school district our size. I'm fine with us not being average. We have higher needs than many school districts. I would like us to achieve more than that. I would like us to flourish and succeed. But I do think that we start from that point and then asking, you know, to add 377 additional positions beyond that. Is that a fully sustainable amount of money for the tax base we have? And again, it's one of the struggles that we have had, I think, as a body in trying to grapple with the budget recommendations is that those numbers have been somewhat difficult to understand for us. And again, we don't set what is done with the Board of Education's money. We have very limited ability to sort of direct and access, but we do have some ability or some obligation to try to be fiscally transparent and to understand what decisions were made to invest in positions with what was known always to be temporary money, right? The ESSER funds were always temporary funds. They were never intended to be anything other than temporary funds. And particularly troubling to me, and I've raised this concern to the school board and to the staff of the school so that I'm not saying anything that has not already been discussed. Particularly troubling to me was that the ways in which the use of ESSER funds was accounted for to the council and to the public in the school board's presentation of their budget requests is not in fact transparent and accurate entirely to what happened. So for instance, the school board's request suggests that they moved the social workers and counselors, 35 counselors and 22 social workers off the local budget onto ESSER. However, at a minimum, and I've been back and forth a bit about how these additional positions were funded, but at a minimum, at least 10 additional positions were funded for those same lines with ESSER dollars. So in fact, 10 new positions were funded with ESSER dollars and 40, I'm getting really tired, I'm losing my numbers, 47 positions were moved off budget. That is a material difference that was not transparently presented to the council and to the public. And again, those positions may very well be in the best interest of our students. I think that we've heard from our parents about how valuable it has been to have additional counselors and additional social workers. But I think it also valuable for our parents to understand that this budget request includes new counselors and new social workers that were not in existence prior to the ESSER funds. So when you are being presented as if all of those counselors and social workers that were locally funded came off and were ESSER funded, that's not in fact an accurate presentation of the budget. So again, we are really wrestling as council members here with our fiscal responsibilities, with our desire to be transparent, and with our desire to serve our students. I want nothing more than my daughter, who is a public school student, and every other child to have the resources that they need. I will close with two other points about fiscal transparency, and then I will defer to my colleagues. I've obviously read the efficiency study with great care. As I understand the budget numbers that we were presented in terms of the full-time equivalent positions, the efficiency study would have primarily been looking at the FY 21-22 school year, because again, our results were received at the end of that school year. In the FY 22-23 budget, there were an additional 90 positions added beyond the FY 21-22 budget. So again, when we're saying that the efficiency study said that the school was at a good level, that was a level less 90 positions than the budget that was presented this year, which is virtually identical to the budget presented for next year. So again, it is not my job to tell the Board of Education how to spend their dollars, but it is my job to ask questions about our fiscal transparency and about what exactly we are telling our community about what dollars are and are not being spent. Because again, the ESSER funds were the largest federal grant for education in the history of this city. I don't think anyone ever envisioned that we would expect our local tax base to be able to absorb amounts equivalent to the largest federal grant for education in the city's history. And so we need to make sure that we are clear to our taxpayers how much of those federal funds we are actually asking them to replace, and how much are in fact is just catching up to, again, what was absolutely, with all grace to the BET and their very difficult situation, a mistake in flat funding that I wish wasn't made. But those are two different issues, and we have to be fair to our taxpayers and being transparent about the consequences of those two different issues. And I'll finally close by saying that I also want us to speak on the most positive possible note about what our schools are achieving. I have been thrilled to hear so many parents talk with such joy about their teachers, their counselors, their social workers, their principals. It is tremendous to me what our school system has achieved, where the ways in which we are flourishing. And I think that it is very important that we talk from building on our strengths and really looking to what is, what is succeeding, where we are achieving. The interventionists, I could call out a number of things that I've heard. These are not our decisions. These are the school board's decisions. But I do believe that the value of their work means that we want to find ways to support continuing the programs that have been most successful from these unique and sort of irreplaceable federal dollars. But that does not mean that we can carry a full 12% load. And it does not mean that we don't think that the schools and our children matter without that. It's merely that we have to find a balance point. So again, I join my colleagues in saying that I hope that we can raise the cap beyond 4%. But what that exact number is, I think, is a challenge that we're still struggling with.
Ms. McMurray?
I know everybody's getting very tired, so I will try to keep this brief. I do have a question after my comments. I just wanted to parlay off of what Ms. Nadjelski-Eichner said and kind of confront the elephant in the room, because my wants versus needs op-ed clearly struck a chord with a lot of people, both good and bad. And I just want to reiterate what I meant by that. Every budget, no matter how big or small, has a list of priorities. And like Ms. Nadjelski-Eichner just said, we cannot set the priority list for the Board of Education. That is their job. However, I pointed it out, and I did use examples, only as examples, to say that every budget has to have a priority list. Every budget cannot have all of their needs on the top of their priority list, or all their wants on the top of priority list. You have to go down and you have to prioritize. And I know one of the parents who's still here tonight, it's almost 11 o'clock, so thank you for being here, but she spoke so eloquently about that stack and that prioritization. And I think it's really important, because one of the reasons I pointed that out was exactly what Ms. Nadjelski-Eichner was saying. We have been asking these questions, and yes, they are tough questions, and we ask them of a lot of the departments, not just the BOE. What are your priorities? And as a parent, I know my priority for our schools is to keep direct services to our students. I have 2 students in the school. So when you come and speak to us, I appreciate it so much more than I think many of you think. We have more parents of young children on this council than I think we have had in years. So we have education advocates on this council. And I just want to make sure that you are all coming and advocating for that priority list to the BOE as well, because we can't have everything. And if they decide a welcome center is at the top of their priority list, I celebrate that. If they decide that the incubator is on the top of that priority list, I celebrate that. That is their decision. But everything can't be at the top of that priority list. And we really need to be asking these questions and holding everybody accountable, because every dollar counts, as you see this evening. So I really encourage all of the people that came out and spoke to us tonight to attend those BOE meetings, to ask their representatives where their money is going and why the first talk of cuts is to direct services of our students. Why are we talking about cutting teachers and social workers and counselors and art programs and enrichment programs? Why aren't we starting at the top? Do we need that many administrators running our schools and micromanaging our teachers who are so fabulous and do the God's work every day with our students? Do we? And do you know how much money they make? A lot. Do you know how much money teachers make? Not enough. So that all comes to my heart, and you can hear it in my voice, and you saw me ugly cry the other night listening to you all. I don't appreciate the sentiment from anyone, and it's not from everyone, but from anyone, that anybody on this council does not care about our kids or our schools or this city, because we spend hours and hours agonizing over these decisions. And we have children in the schools. I have one who has an IEP. And I thank my lucky stars every day that I have the privilege to help them where otherwise they would not be helped. But I know there are tons of families out there that are not in the same position as me, and I have to think about them. So the very families that we are trying to service in the schools, we're getting ready to price out of here. How does that help anyone? So I'm going to put homework on your plate, because you often put homework on our plate, and we will take it gladly. Hold people accountable, not just the people here, but the people on the BOE, the superintendent, the people who are spending your money on the BOE. Ask them why the first request of a cut is to the direct services of our students, because there's other places they can look.
Ms. Revolus?
There's a lot that's been said, and I just want to say thank you to the parents that came here, to Ms. McMurray. Not recently, but we've had conversations. All of the council knows how I feel about a lot that has been recently stated, because I feel I've been in a space and place for several years that is addressing the lower hanging fruit that gets strangled out of these situations, are unable to probably just move, but are pushed out in the same way. I help children and families on a very normal basis. Not only do I have my youngest group of kids that in the older spectrum just graduate last year, but I have a now 7-month-old that I think you might have just heard. I want to express, like, for example, conversations of, like, you know, you say Latino community, but I represent the portion of the Latino community that gets forgotten, the Haitian community. You talk about services, but I represent the community of Black children who have been perpetually out of services well before a pandemic. You talk about people who are basically being suffocated, and I represent those people. That being said, these inequities have been well before a pandemic. We're also in a place and space in a city that we're going to get suffocated out also just because we keep doing these, we overlook the realities of having our residents have some type of ownership, whether it be home or business ownership here, to be able to be a different type of taxpayer to live here. We have developments that just provide additional renting spaces, and it's going to, at the end of the day, push out again our lower fruits. And those two combined, your housing, your ownership is well directly connected to your ability to fund your schools. There's no way to overlook that. But secondly, one of the things of why I raised my hand is one of what Councilwoman McMurray just said. I really do hope that parents do hold accountable, not only, ask questions to the BET, but hold accountability to the Norwalk Public School and the BOE. There's a conversation I've had with some I'm getting tired too, with residents here, that I can actually give Diane Loricella, who spoke not only at the financial meeting, but here, about a suggestion and particularly like we said from the top, we have a central office that if we just cut a third of the funding that's going on there, we can address so much to our schools, to our teachers. We also weren't supposed to, those ESSER funds were supposed to help students in different ways. We weren't supposed to create new employment from those ESSER funds that we all knew were limited. And we blatantly asked outright to make sure that these won't be responsibilities of the city of Norwalk afterwards, because we knew the ESSER funds were a temporary matter. But that just happened anyway, and we're getting looked at like she just, like we were all saying, we very much care. It's not that we don't care, but we directly asked for that not to happen, and it did. And there was conversation even saying, why would you tell them to use the ESSER funds and then not help them after? Well, we told them exactly not to do that. So, and you know, baby girl just said, yeah, we did it. So that being said, I just wanted to double back on the fact that we cannot suffocate our families that connect to those children that we're trying to help in our schools. Emotional atmospheres not only happen within the school, but within the home environment, because like one parent just said, I'm working too much to be able to be interacting in a way that I would like to. We keep raising taxes. Our families, just like you said, they're paying more, our kids are spending more time in schools than they are with their families, when they are with their parents. And that's also another thing we have to be very careful about, because schools also have the parental authority over your child when they have your child as well. So that's another thing, that's another conversation for another day. But as parents, we have to be careful of. I hope as a whole, no matter what party you are, no matter what district you are, that you realize that our longevity of Norwalk in a generational matter is what will get us to be in a space to not only take care of our kids, but take care of our adults and to take care of our town, our parks, so on. We need to stop moving in a way of that we're going to self-implode on the city side. And we need to hold some accountability on the NPS side. There is a lot from the top, and I even speak to teachers as well. There's a lot from the top that if we were truly caring about our school systems, that we can cut within. Something also that Ms. Lauricella said, it is a good idea to start looking at different ways of breaking down our expenses overall. Maybe solar is a thought. I know that there's a lot of, I'm not sure if it was ever truly taken care of, but we have environmental issues within the school just from the buildings that the kids are in, let alone trying to get educated. But I don't want my child getting sick from the environment that they're literally just sitting in to try to get educated. We also need to pay attention to places and spaces in development that might be still pushing food deserts. If our kids can't eat properly, that's a problem. If we're going to high in taxes and they can't financially buy food for their home, that's a problem. There's so much around this that's not just what's happening in the school. Suffocating a family is going to hurt those kids. Trying to push out families will minimize the amount of children that are in the schools, change the type of dynamic that are in the schools, and we will still have to pay for it and can't go backwards because we have no abilities to. I would suggest and hope that the parents truly do make more of a asserted effort to have a stronger conversation with the BET and have more accountability to the leadership of NPS, to our Board of Education system, and to understand that this is right. You have a common council that is very much parents. You have a common council who is very much concerned just as well of their children. I'm actually also concerned of not only for behavioral situation and supports, but I still want to allocate growth in communities that don't normally get that either. I don't get to see the majority of my children in space and in places that they're able to graduate in a sense that they're not going to remedial classes when they go into college, or if they can even go to college at all. So it's bigger. I just wanted to state a greater concern that I've said for many years now, suffocating our children, giving more accountability to NPS, and truly understanding how, as a town, if we keep doing developments that don't perpetuate generational sustainability for our residents here, we're going to keep having these battles of tax raising that we can't afford. So that being all, hopefully it's already 11:03. I'm gonna let it go there.
Ms. Young?
So quickly, because it is 11:03. You know, one of the things that I don't hear us talk a lot about publicly or openly, but we do have our discussions in our chamber council, a caucus room. And when we think about, I have to say what Jen said. I mean, what everyone has said around this table. We care about children. My children have gone through the Norwalk public school system, and they've had their challenges, just like so many of us may have had or are experiencing with our young people, but we've moved through that. But one of the things that I think that we don't talk enough about is, and it's not to say that it's anything wrong with it, but we're looking at a city of 91,000 people. We're looking at a school system of about 11,500 young people. And I think it was shared that those numbers may be going down. And when you look at that percentage wise, we're looking at 8% of the population that we're looking to fund with 60% of our budget. So what does that mean for seniors? What does that mean for the renters? What does that mean for everyone else when our tax base has to be increased to cover those costs? And so we have to think about all of those things when we keep talking about diversity, and that's what has drawn people to the city of Norwalk, which is a good thing. But we challenge that when we constantly look at a budget that is challenging on us as a city. I know this year, Mayor, I think you've asked, you know, departments to cut again, look at where you can cut again, so that we can come up with a manageable budget that is not taxing on all of our residents. And that's all of us. My children are grown. I'm happy to pay taxes to support young people as long as I live in the city of Norwalk or wherever I live. And that is true, I think, of everybody that lives in the city of Norwalk and all of us here that are doing this work. But I think that we have to look at those things as a whole. And I think the other thing that is an issue, and I hear this every year, everyone says the process, there needs to be more communication between the Board of Education and the Common Council. We try that. And our hands are tied a lot by what Ms. I know I always want to say Nora. I'm just going to say Nora.
Call me Nora.
Your name, my tongue is getting tied. It's 11:05 p.m. That they're challenges, and we all know that they're challenges. And I hope that as parents, you're talking about the realities of what we have to do and how this decision is made. And we do not come to our final decisions lightly. It is not an easy thing. We care about children. We care about everybody that lives in the city of Norwalk, whether you're a renter, whether you're a homeowner. You live in the city, we care about you as residents. And it's not just about the schools. What drives people and keeps people to a community is the way that it looks and it feels, in addition to the school. So that means we have to keep our parks up to par. It means we have to have nice amenities for folks to want to stay in this town and partake in. And sometimes that drives additional revenues. So we do have to find other revenue streams, but our hands are really tied by a lot of state statutes. And so we'd like to get to a point where we have those conversations, true conversations about how the money is spent. Because as it's been said ad nauseum, we talk about this a lot. I think we're all just mentally drained at this point talking about this, but we've got work to do. We'd love to be able to sit down with the Board of Education and talk about their priorities and what that looks like and what worked last year, what worked the next year. We give you money and say, thank you for your, here it is to support your ideas, your programming, or whatever it is that you think is going to help our young children. But maybe it didn't happen that way. Maybe something else took place. We don't know that. So all we do is just say, this is what you asked for. This is what we can do. But I think there needs to be better communication. But how do we do it? We don't know. We've tried. And this isn't the first council that has attempted that. I know Mayor and all of you, the others that have been on this council more than I have had those conversations. And this is a real challenge. And maybe it's up to the parents to say that, hey, Board of Education, you need to do better with partnering and having real transparent conversations with the council. And so I think we need to get to that point. And Jen, I hear your passion because we're all here and we want to do the right thing. But as we said, we can't please everybody, but we will move forward. And I think we talked a lot with budget information that was not correct, but we had a lot of conversation, but this was a necessary conversation. And I think moving forward, that could be something that we consider. As maybe some of you know, we tried to even have a conversation and we want to meet with our state delegation. We want to talk about these things so that we can move the needle a little bit on how we can progress in this process because it's not working. And we know that. It works, it's working for that basic thing of providing funding, but this needs to change. How we do it, we're racking our brains trying to figure it out, but I know that there are conversations about it. And so I'm done. Oh, motion to adjourn. I beat you.
Hold on, wait, I raised my, wait, I raised my hand real quick though.
Doesn't matter.
I raised my hand real quick. Hold on, I raised my hand real quick. Guys, I raised my hand real quick. Guys, hello?
Oh, God.
Guys, I raised my hand.
Yes, we heard you. You're
Oh,
adjourned.
okay.
Good night, all.
I raised my hand before we were adjourned.
Oh, did you want to say something? I think
Yes, that's what I.
Sorry. We thought you were adjourning.
Thought you were making your motion.
No, I was gonna make the motion, but I want to say one more thing.
We already adjourned.
So we're gonna, okay, so we're just not.
Diana, I'll listen to you. I'm here for a minute.
I appreciate you so much. You don't even know. I don't say it from afar. There was just only one more thing I was just gonna give an idea to, but truly being a person who grew up with a welcome center situation in my home, my father ran the Haitian Community Center. I just wanted to give the idea that this center or a community center like this, a welcome